Cunning Palace's beauty Long Yufeng kept looking at the departing carriage a little distracted. Was that the crown prince? Truly outstanding. When he returned to the capital the previous day, he had received the emperor's decree, making him into a grand tutor for the crown prince. He had found it very surprising then. After all, he was making a general into a tutor. It seemed like His Majesty's intentions were clear, but if the emperor really had those intentions, why would he pretend to disregard the crown prince for so many years? He hadn't given the crown prince even half of the usual rights. Though Lung Yufeng didn't want to get involved in the deliberation hall's inner intrigues, he was probably unable to escape that since the day he became a general. When he saw the crown prince's carriage a moment ago, he had wanted to catch a glimpse of him. It was just a glimpse, but even he had no choice but to praise the crown prince's good features, as well as his imposing manner. However, those were all things that didn't concern him. When the time came, he would immediately depart for the border area and leave this complicated capital behind. His heart was full of the hot-blooded battlefields that he liked most. Yufeng, why aren't you going in? Huanamo Che, dressed in blue clothes, was watching his good friend, who was sitting on horseback seemingly lost in thought. The sight had stirred up the young ladies into throwing him stealthy peeks. Lung Yufeng composed himself and upon seeing his pal Huanamo Che, quickly leapt down from the horse. He said happily, "How come you're here?" As far as Lung Yufeng was concerned, attending these banquets was a boring affair. However, his status didn't allow him to skip out on them. He didn't anticipate that his friend would also come, as he rarely showed up for the previous birthday feasts of the emperor. Hee, it's because I was afraid you'd be bored alone in the palace, so as a good friend, I've come to keep you company. Huanamo Che spoke some half-true, half-false words. Although he didn't hold an official position, he still had the title of the capital's first son. No matter what kinds of small and large feasts were hosted in the palace, he always received an invitation. In the previous years, he wouldn't necessarily attend even once, but thinking of the crown prince now, he had finally decided to show his face in the palace. Though the crown prince was very intelligent, he didn't have much authority. Moreover, people's hearts were obscure within the palace. If something really happened later, as the prince's grand tutor, he could take care of the problem. Lung Yufeng threw a glance at Huanamo Che, obviously not fully convinced by his excuse. Although they were close friends, and he trusted that if it came to life and death, they wouldn't betray each other. They definitely weren't such kind-hearted people. Where would they have so much time to come and waste it at this useless event? Even if they had some, they would be better off using it to get a good sleep. It's been only 1 year that we haven't seen each other. Emo Che, you've started to speak so insincerely. Lung Yufeng scoffed coldly. After that, the two of them walked side by side toward the inside of the imperial palace. The two of them. One was a callous war god, the other was a gentle young master. Whether their status or their appearance, both were far above everyone else. Adding their ability to their status, the two of them were highly coveted by countless women within the capital. However, neither of them had ever glanced at a woman twice. A crazy rumor had started spreading that the general family's General Long and the prime minister family's young master Huan were gay lovers. When the two of them had learned about it, they had been indignant at the time, but had later thought it might be all right if it made those women stay further away from them. As a result, they had clarified things and had let the rumor circulate. Moreover, they also felt that it was impossible for them to fall in love with a girl like ordinary people did, so they had never put much importance on their own marriage matters. Thus, as long as the two of them showed up anywhere together, they would receive numerous female gazes filled with pain. Do the words spoken by these common people hold some truth? Huanamo Che smiled tauntingly. He had encountered too many two-faced people. His friendship with Lung Yufeng wasn't only based on mutual appreciation, but more than that, it was because both of them were sincere in their feelings. Looking at these people's manner, I'm afraid what kind of rumors will spread about us around the capital tomorrow. Huanamo Che observed the gathered women, some of them obviously blushing in admiration, others looking jealous. Aversion flashed through his eyes. Lung Yufeng indifferently swept the surrounding people with a glance. Sure enough, there were many people who minded their business, but plenty of them were furtively sizing them down as well. What was more, They were discussing them in whispers. However, Long Yufeng didn't care at all. If he really minded, he would have already clarified everything long ago. It's actually all the same to me. In any case, I'll go to the border area before too long. As for you, who knows how many female hearts you'll hurt? Lung Yufeng stated with a spiteful smile. So quickly. Huan Imoche frowned. Every time Lung Yufeng returned to the capital, he would only stay for a few days, then immediately ride back to the border. Huan Imoche knew that there weren't any disputes at the borders currently, yet Lung Yufeng wasn't willing to return to the capital even for the Lunar New Year celebrations. It seemed that, you still can't let go of that matter? Both of their hearts had been wounded and scarred over. Perhaps because they had similarly experienced a bitter past event, the two talented men could understand each other well. There's nothing to let go of. I've already taken my revenge. Staying at the border area for so many years isn't because I'm hiding away, but because the capital is too dull and there's nothing of interest here. Might as well have fun at the border. Lung Yufeng said, but his expression turned colder. Even if he had let go of those certain matters, he still felt agitated on the inside. What about you? When will you start? You've been preparing for so long. It ought to be enough. Lung Yufeng asked with some concern. It can't be that you're unable to start. Ha! Huan Imoche sneered. Unable to start? That won't happen. Soon enough, he'll get the gift I've prepared for him. Huan Imoche could have struck a lot sooner in the past several years, but he wanted to see him climb much higher. Falling when he was at the peak of his excitement would be that much more painful. You've entered the Crown Prince's residence as a Grand Tutor. I wonder, Lung Yufeng asked, a little curious. He rarely got interested in others. Even when he knew that he shouldn't get involved with the Crown Prince, he kept thinking of the youngster he had seen just now and couldn't control the need to ask about him. Noting his pal's apparent interest, who knew why, Huan Imoche suddenly didn't want to let him know of the Crown Prince's excellence. More than that, he didn't want his good friend to become his Grand Tutor. He wished that he would be the Crown Prince's only mentor. Then later, he could also become his personal friend. Nothing special. Huan Imoche put on an appearance as if he'd said too much, making Lung Yufeng give up on asking further. After all, it was just a little curiosity. The Crown Prince was merely a stranger to him. Lung Yufeng brushed aside the lingering impression of the Crown Prince from his mind. The two men's respective thoughts turned to the banquet held at the Great Hall, as they made their way there. As for Shang Wuxin, she didn't directly go to the Great Hall, but rather avoided the crowds by entering the most peaceful dwelling within the palace. It was precisely her imperial mother's, Empress Qiu's dwelling, Cunning Palace One. Shang Wuxin hadn't come there to grieve. It was nothing more than the fact that it was peaceful, so her ears could enjoy some quiet. Crown Prince too, it's very beautiful here, Wu Ju said, gasping in admiration. Although they were still somewhat apprehensive of the Crown Prince, they had slowly started to relax around him after being in contact for a while. Looking around, Shang Wuxin found that while it was an empress palace, it didn't have a luxurious beauty about it. Instead, it was exceptionally refined and serene in all respects, while the courtyard was full of fresh flowers. Those flowers weren't any rare or precious breeds. On the contrary, they were very common. But because someone was looking after them carefully, they exuded an outstanding beauty. Though the palace was uninhabited, it was kept very clean. If the three of them weren't so proficient in martial arts, perhaps they wouldn't have been able to come here, as there were many guards stationed outside, defending the dwelling's walls. It truly is. Shang Wuxin felt like this palace could cleanse someone's mind. She thought her imperial mother had been one fine quality woman. It was no wonder that none of the other consorts could take over her position as empress. After walking around for a long time, Shang Wuxin noticed that the place that was most tended to was a certain side chamber. That must have been her room when she was young. Empress Qiu had died of an illness when Shang Wuxin was 2 years old. Shang Wuxin ought to have lived there for 2 years. The place had been brimming with a mother's love for her child at that time. She went to the bed inside the side chamber and lied down, narrowing her eyes, while Wu Wei and Wu Ju stood by keeping watch over the Crown Prince. However, the three of them soon heard footsteps heading for the dwelling. Wu Wei and Wu Ju promptly entered the side chamber and concealed themselves inside, while Shang Wuxin didn't make a move, still resting on the bed as before. That person entered the sleeping chamber in Cunning Palace and stayed there for a good while, then left without saying a word. When they sensed that the person had already left, Wu Wei and Wu Ju showed themselves. Still shaken, Wu Wei spoke. I wonder who could have come here so unexpectedly. Imperial Father, Shang Wuxin said with a vague implication. The birthday feast in the Great Hall, the luxurious Great Hall, was full of ministers and their families sitting inside. The brightly dressed women were sitting beside their respective parents, frequently looking over the rich young masters. At the top of the Great Hall were seated several imperial concubines. Though the emperor had many concubines, there were only 3 present today. Emperor Shang was wearing a bright yellow and formal robe, sitting at the highest seat. His pair of shrewd eyes were brimming with strength as he occasionally glanced at several ministers. Those ministers appeared respectful, but in fact, they were all a little afraid. Your Majesty, everyone's gathered. We might as well begin. Consort Exian said with a smile as she looked the emperor. She was wearing a purple palace attire, while her face was finely made up, making her appear sweet and charming. Her hair was rolled up in a bun, supported by a golden pearl hairpin that sparkled and dazzled the eyes. She was separately decorated with numerous other pearl and jade ornaments, entirely covered in jewels. Consort Exian had a son and a daughter. Her son was the 3rd Prince Shang Qingying, while her daughter was the eldest Princess Shang Qin. Consort Exian was an arrogant and willful mistress within the palace, often acting like a spoiled child irrespective of the occasion. Yet Emperor Shang had never shown any discontent with her. After all, ever since knowing Empress Qiu, he had never visited another consort's chambers again. Even though Empress Qiu had been dead for 13 years now, he had never called upon any concubine to serve him in bed. Everyone? There's still someone who's not here. The East Palace's crown prince has actually not come to the emperor birthday. That's highly improper. Consort Qin stated resentfully. She was wearing a snow-white flowing brocade dress, while her beautiful hair was left down. Her pretty face looked a bit charming and her demeanor was stylish. But when she mentioned the crown prince, her glossy eyes darkened with hatred. Consort Qin was an elder at the palace. At the time the emperor was still a crown prince, she was already his side consort, so she was also the first one to give birth to a prince. Unfortunately, her child hadn't been conferred the title of crown prince. Consort Qin only had this son, the eldest Prince Shang Chunjiao. Consort Qin's words made everyone take a look around the Great Hall, but they didn't find the rumored crown prince. Their hearts were unavoidably full of doubts. Could the rumors among the commoners from the previous days be false? Was the crown prince still that worthless crown prince they knew? Huanamo Che's brows creased for a brief moment, finding Consort Qin's words too harmful to the crown prince. So his circumstances had always been this difficult. Thinking of that graceful and keen youngster growing up in such a dirty environment, Huanamo Che was suddenly filled with disgust for Consort Qin, so much that he felt like saying a few words in chastisement to her. If it weren't for his formidable self-control, he would have probably really done so. However, why did he want to do such a thing? Just because he was the crown prince's mentor? Lung Yufeng determined that the crown prince really wasn't inside the Great Hall and couldn't help but wonder. He obviously saw him enter at the palace gates, but the crown prince wasn't currently here. What had actually happened? Could it be that he had run into some problem, or did simply not wish to attend the birthday banquet? Saying things like the crown prince being afraid and similar guesses, Lung Yufeng couldn't accept those as true, because the look in the crown prince's eyes was as fearsome as those of the wild beasts he had seen before. What would that kind of person be afraid of? Consort Qin smiled complacently. After the crown prince had schemed against her son in the streets, Minister Bai had really come to the emperor to say that the eldest prince wasn't well-mannered. His Majesty had ordered her son to stay put in his residence and reflect. He wasn't allowed to go out even for the emperor's birthday. It had turned Consort Qin into a target for ridicule by the other concubines in the imperial palace. Emperor Shang kept sitting with a face that showed neither joy nor anger, making people speculate whether he still loathed the crown prince as before and also revising their own views of the prince. They wanted to get a hint from Emperor Shang's expression, but as an emperor, he had learned to conceal his emotions long ago. so that no one could guess his inner thoughts. Is the crown prince really so audacious that he still hasn't come yet? It can't be that he doesn't put the emperor in his sights. Consort Xian's hand covered her mouth, yet her voice was clear enough for everyone to hear. But it wasn't like everyone around was so brainless that they couldn't figure her out. The other concubines didn't utter a thing. Not all the concubines within the imperial palace hated the crown prince initially, but because Empress Qiu had seized all of the emperor's love, it had made them resentful. Emperor Shang's heart wouldn't let another woman inside. How could such a love not make the numerous concubines jealous? But as Empress Qiu was already dead, the resentment had shifted onto the crown prince instead. As a mere concubine, you actually dare speak behind this prince's back? I wonder what filthy thing Consort Xian's mouth has eaten today? A low voice, cold enough to freeze people, rang from outside the main hall. Everyone realized that the crown prince had come, so they turned to look at the main hall's entrance. While Huan Emoche's expression loosened up as his heart calmed down, Lung Yufeng blanked when he heard the crown prince's words. The crown prince seemed to be fairly unrestrained. Everyone noticed when the youngster wearing a black brocade robe entered the hall. What astounded them was the youth's breathtaking features. He had a fair complexion with a certain frailness to it, yet that didn't decrease his appeal. His eyes were tranquil without a ripple, but so clear, one could see the bottom. There wasn't a single impurity within them. They seemed able to absorb a person's heart and soul. He had a delicate but straight-nosed bridge. The corners of his lips were pulled back in a gentle smile. He was like the spring rain in March, subtle and delicate. Watching the crown prince, something briefly flashed through Emperor Shang's eyes before it disappeared as though it never existed. The whole crowd was astonished by the crown prince's looks. It wasn't that none of them had seen him before. Even though he rarely came out, there were ministers who had already met him. But each time, the crown prince would hang his head low, so no one could clearly see his face. Thus, it was the first time for everyone to witness the crown prince's exceptional countenance. He didn't lose to the top place holders of the beauty rankings among the young noble males. In fact, he was more remarkable than them. Even the two most outstanding men in the Great Hall, General Long and young Master Huan, couldn't compare to the crown prince in terms of appearance. It wasn't that their looks were inferior. The three of them each had their own strong points. However, the crown prince's eyes and his body seemed to hide many secrets, and that sort of mysterious appeal amplified his extraordinary looks. Greeting, Imperial Father. Shang Wuxin didn't care a sliver about everyone else's expressions. After she entered the main hall, she bowed slightly in salutation. Although it wasn't the kowtow required by etiquette, there was nothing inappropriate about it when it concerned the East Palace's crown prince. You've come. Emperor Shang didn't even glance at the crown prince below him. That made many believe that he wasn't fond of the crown prince as usual. The emperor spoke without reserve. Come take your seat. Shang Wuxin nodded, then walked toward the special seat designated for the crown prince. The seat was below the emperor's, conspicuously positioned first on the right. Below that was Lung Yufeng's seat, then Huan Emoche's. Crown Prince. Lung Yufeng and Huan Emoche greeted at the same time. Lung Yufeng thought the prince was out of the ordinary, so he decided to say something, while Huan Emoche felt his mood improve as soon as he saw the crown prince for whatever reason, so he couldn't help but open his mouth to speak. Shang Wuxin nodded in response. No matter what, those two men held enormous influence within the imperial capital. As long as there was no need to, she wouldn't make them her enemies. Moreover, Shang Wuxin was absolutely certain that those two weren't as affable as they presented themselves. No, they didn't look that gentle on the surface either, but many couldn't see that. At that moment, the people who felt that the crown prince's position was hopeless suddenly got a shock. The two men, who had greeted the crown prince on their own initiative, were actually General Long and young Master Huan. When had those two ever taken the initiative to greet any of the other princes before? It seemed that there really was something different about the crown prince, but recalling the emperor's earlier manner, many kept wavering. Everyone hesitated over what move to make next. Should they, or shouldn't they support the crown prince from now on? Chapter 21. The Crown Prince's impermanence consort Exine lifted her gaze to Emperor Shang and spoke as if she'd been wronged. Your Majesty, what Chunxia won? Said were all true. Not only did Crown Prince leisurely stroll in, late, but he also took to insulting Chunxia. She wanted the Emperor to pass his judgment, preferably in her favor. However, she was unaware that her impertinent remarks had caused the faces of several people in the Great Hall to pale. 1. Equals a form of self-address used by females, meaning your consort/concubine. Emperor Shang neither answered her nor reproached her. His indifference almost made her eyes redden, but fortunately, after years of experience residing in the palace, she was able to quickly readjust her mood and even continue on what she had been saying. The Crown Prince displayed such ignorance towards proper courtesy. How could he possibly shoulder the great responsibility that comes with his title? The instant these words were spoken, even her own son, third Prince Shang Qing, shot his mother a look. Unfortunately, Consort Exine's eyes and rationality were both shrouded by jealousy. Her love for Emperor Shang was genuine, but it was a pity that she was never anything in his eyes. Towards this, she was tolerant, because Emperor Shang did not love anyone else either. However, when Empress Qiu showed up at the palace, Emperor Shang's doting and tender side surfaced. How could Consort Exine not be jealous? Now, seeing the Crown Prince, whose appearance held some resemblance to Empress Qiu's, hatred tempted Consort Exine to bring death upon him. Her words shocked the Great Hall into silence. Then, most of the onlookers became interested and felt entertained as they waited to see if Emperor Shang would punish the Crown Prince or defend him. The indolent expression that was originally on Shang Wuxin's face turned into an icy one. Her deep phoenix eyes flashed with a wicked gleam. She didn't think that a trifling little concubine would dare to rebuke her while they were in the Great Hall. It appeared that the original Crown Prince really didn't have any dignity. Huan Moche and Lung Yufeng were the first ones to notice that the aura around Shang Wuxin had chilled and became imposing. In their hearts, the two men felt that Consort Exine was truly a fool. Regardless of whether the Crown Prince was favored or not, it was not a concubine's place to decide such things. Nonetheless, Huan Moche was curious to see how the Crown Prince would handle this. Who are you? Shang Wuxin asked as she picked up a cup of tea from the table and slowly enjoyed the drink. Consort Exine didn't expect her provocation to elicit that sort of question, causing the expression on her beautiful face to crack. She pointed a polished finger at Shang Wuxin and said, Bin Fei too, is your elder. Does the Crown Prince insist on sustaining an arrogant attitude? She even swept a gaze over the present officials, prompting them to open their eyes so they could see the Crown Prince's lack of conduct. 2. Equals a form of self-address used by concubines/consorts, meaning this concubine/consort. PFT. Shang Wuxin lazily looked up and glanced at her. Elder? You're nothing but one of Fu Huang's 3 consorts. A mere concubine? Really? And yet you dare call yourself an elder? Or could it be that you wish to replace Bangong's 4, late Muhu 5, and seize her title as the Empress? If so, then Bin Gong might consider recognizing you as my elder 6. I apologize for the succession of footnotes here. 3. Equals a term used by children of the Emperor, meaning imperial father. 4. Equals a form of self-address used by imperial family members, literally meaning this palace, but in this case means this prince. 5. Equals a term used by children of the Empress, meaning imperial mother. 6. Equals it means elder, but here, it's just referring to an older individual who should be treated with respect. Explanation of Shang Wuxin's verbal abuse. Compared to a concubine, a consort is of higher status, but they essentially serve the same purpose, so SWX was mocking and degrading Consort Exine. Consort Exine paled, and even the other concubines and ministers were panicking slightly. Who didn't know that in Emperor Shang's eyes and ears, Empress Qiu was a taboo topic? Those who mentioned her were met with miserable consequences, so although His Majesty had yet to erect a new empress, not a single minister dared to suggest otherwise. Now that the Crown Prince accused Consort Exine of wanting to replace Empress Qiu, they could only imagine what would happen to Consort Exine. Sure enough, Emperor Shang's eyes turned cold in a moment, and he regarded the consort with eyes full of disgust and murderous intent. You're sputtering nonsense. Consort Xian looked at Emperor Shang, terrified. Your Majesty, Shinki does not harbor such ambitions. Crown Prince is speaking nonsense. What Bengong hates most is when others point fingers at Bengong, and even more so when someone challenges Bengong's dignity, but Consort Xian has managed to accomplish both. Tell me, what should Bengong do? Shang Wuxin put down the teacup that was in her hand, her tone chilling. She commanded, Wu Wei, slap her face. Wu Ju, Consort Xian's finger is quite detestable. Shang Wuxin's words had just left her lips when Wu Wei and Wu Ju walked out from behind her and moved towards Consort Xian. The corners of their lips were curved into evil smiles. This Consort Xian had the guts to mistreat their master. They'd been holding themselves back for ages. You dare? Consort Xian exclaimed fearfully, but unfortunately, neither Wu Wei nor Wu Ju wanted to waste words on her. Moreover, although they were both just maidservants, they acted solely on the Crown Prince's orders, so the moment Wu Wei reached the consort, she gathered force into her palm and gave Consort Xian 2 slaps on the face. Wu Wei possessed notable strength, so the impact made Consort Xian feel like even her teeth were rattling. Wu Ju didn't wait for her to cry out before she reached out and snapped the finger that was used to point at the Crown Prince. Kacha! Consort Xian's finger drooped at an awkward angle. It turned out that Wu Ju had actually shattered the bone, so the imperial physicians wouldn't be able to fix it either. Consort Xian let out a pained cry while the officials in the Great Hall were all frightened by the Crown Prince's cruel methods. What part of the Crown Prince was incompetent, and what part of him was cowardly? If his maidservants were already this merciless, the degree of his own cruelty could only be left to one's own imagination. Mu Fei, Princess Shang Qinmi rushed over to Consort Xian's side and, seeing her agonized mother, faced the Crown Prince and angrily shouted, How can you treat my Mu Fei, 7? Like this? 7 equals a term used by children of consorts/concubines, meaning mother consort/concubine. In response to the princess's accusation, Shang Wuxin said unhurriedly, despite being a trivial little concubine, Consort Xian dared to instigate the relationship between Fu Huang and Bengong. Her offense calls upon punishment. The imperial harem shouldn't be meddling in political affairs, yet Consort Xian tried to abet imperial father into revoking Bengong's position as the crown prince. What's more, Fu Huang's love for Muhu is immovable, but now Consort Xian wants to sit in the empress's seat. Say, Huangji 8, why can't I give her a small punishment? 8 equals a term used between children of the emperor, meaning imperial older sister. Shang Qinmi couldn't utter a word. Although she knew that the crown prince was simply making groundless claims, she had no way to refute. Moreover, now that Empress Qiu was involved, not only would Fu Huang not help, he might actually berate Mu Fei instead. Fu Huang, do you think Akin 9's actions were appropriate? Shang Wuxin looked up at Emperor Shang, seemingly unafraid of his sharp gaze. In the eyes of everyone else, the crown prince's aura was even more fierce than the emperor's. 9 equals a form of self-address used by sons of the emperor, meaning your son. For crown prince to partake in easing Zhen's cares and burdens, Zhen feels very gratified. Emperor Shang answered apathetically, and with that, the matter became a thing of the past. Nobody paid heed when Princess Qinmi escorted Consort Xian back to her seat. 10 equals a form of self-address used exclusively by the emperor, referring to oneself. Still, no one could figure out Emperor Shang's intentions or what he thought of the crown prince. But there was one point that everyone saw clearly. The former crown prince was but a guise, and now that the guise was shed, his true nature was revealed. From now on, they would have to be more cautious towards him. Chapter 22. Special birthday commemoration. In the center of the Great Hall, palace girls swathed in dancing robes were immersed in performing a meticulous dance, but alas, there'd always be a few restless dancers who would repeatedly send flirtatious winks towards the sons of the palace officials. The 3 most handsome men in the Great Hall were met with no exceptions. Shang Wuxin wore a smile on her lips as she watched the coquettish dancers, but who knew what she was laughing at? One could suggest that maybe a dancer had caught the crown prince's eye, but that didn't seem right. A majority of the onlookers agreed that compared to His Majesty's, the crown prince's thoughts were much harder to surmise. Lung Yufeng did not spare a single glance for the dancers and instead focused solely on drinking the wine in front of him on the table. To him, women weren't even as appeasing as good wine. If it weren't for the event being His Majesty's birthday commemoration, Lung Yufeng would have thrown the dancers out already. Huanamoche took in the hall's scenery with a warm and mild gaze, but he didn't look at the dancers. The looks they cast him were openly ignored. He suddenly felt that no matter how beautiful these women appeared, they were only soiling his eyes, for they could not compare to the crown prince. With the dance performance, the hall's ambience improved significantly, inducing a much more harmonious atmosphere. Earlier, because of Consort Xian, the atmosphere had turned cold, but now it was becoming lively again. It was, after all, His Majesty's birthday, so why wouldn't everyone wear a joyous expression? Fu Huang 1. Akin, 2, wishes Fu Huang boundless longevity and good health. Eldest Prince Shang Chengzhao knelt down respectfully and held up a landscape painting that he'd personally painted. The painting itself was not particularly striking, but its eminence was in the fact that he'd painted it with his own hands. A1 equals a term used by children of the emperor, meaning Father Emperor. 2 equals a form of self-address used by sons of the emperor, meaning your son. N3. Eldest prince's efforts are indeed genuine. Emperor Shang was quite satisfied with the gift and gestured for eunuch Su to stow it away. 3 equals a sound of agreement or acknowledgement. Emperor Shang never called his children by their given names, and numerous ministers were aware that he treated each prince with equal favor. This gave rise to several divisions of power and influence within the imperial court, and the great emperor himself also carried some influence. Fu Huang. Akin sincerely wishes Fu Huang an auspicious life and good health. Second Prince Shang Lan Hai said ceremoniously. His body was clad in a cyan robe lined with gold. As he spoke, he offered a lotus flower that he'd exerted great effort to find. The colors violet and blue coincided on its petals, making the lotus truly a wondrous and beautiful sight to behold. The second prince was Consort Ning's son. In the palace, Consort Ning was known to be a placid consort who didn't fight nor vie for the emperor's attention. She retained her tranquil nature in both the past and the present, so there were scarcely any consorts who held enmity towards her. Furthermore, she devoted herself to Buddha, so she spent most of her time secluded inside the palace Fo Tang 4. Consort Ning had 2 children, second prince Shang Lan Hai and third princess Shang Zhoumo E4, equals a room built specifically for the worshipping of Buddha. Emperor Shang studied the phenomenal lotus and pleasantly nodded his head. Many knew that today, the second prince seemed to have garnered the most satisfaction from His Majesty. Fu Huang. Akin sincerely wishes Fu Huang longevity, parallel to the southern mountains and happiness as immense as the eastern sea. Third Prince Shang Chung Yin congratulated. His gift was a statue sculpted from fine jade. Just one glance at its luster was enough to confirm its exceptional value. Originally, the third prince had believed that today, he would definitely be able to curry favor from Fu Huang, but with the interference of his Mufei 5's blunders, third Prince Shang Qingyin was afraid that regardless of what type of gift he gave, Fu Huang would not regard him as anything special. 5 equals a term used by children of consorts/concubines, meaning mother consort/concubine. Amongst Emperor Shang's 5 princes and 4 princesses, Shang Wuxin was the youngest of the young. In truth, having only 9 children in the imperial family was actually considered a pitiful amount. That small number was due to the fact that since the year Empress Qiu entered the palace, Emperor Shang had not touched any other women, which had resulted in the sparse amount of offspring in the imperial family. After the other princes and princesses brought up their gifts, only Shang Wuxin remained in her seat, incessantly trying the dishes on the table. When she came across something that tasted decent, she'd take a few bites, and when she encountered something that she didn't like, she'd frown, scrunch her eyebrows together, and not touch it again. Others might not have noticed these little actions of hers, But Lung Yufeng and Huanamo Che were sitting next to her and saw them clearly. Simultaneously, they thought that the crown prince's gluttonous behavior was extremely lovable. So lovable that they wanted to preserve and treasure the sight of it. It seems like the crown prince hasn't given his gift yet, Consort Qin said hesitantly. She just witnessed the crown prince's cruelty, so although she wanted to damage his reputation, she couldn't do it blatantly. Remembering the failures of the assassins she'd hired, she felt that the crown prince wasn't as simple as he seemed. At her words, everyone turned their attention to Shang Wuxin. Though they didn't dare behave as rudely as Consort Xian had, they were still nonetheless curious about the crown prince's gift. After all, during His Majesty's birthday accommodations in the past, the crown prince never attended and instead hid away in his estate. Shang Wuxin put down the snack she was holding and then took a box out of Wu Wei's hands. Fu Huang. Akin sincerely wishes Fu Huang good health. What an insincere commendation. Or rather, there was no heart put in it at all. Several people thought that perhaps the crown prince was too spontaneous, or perhaps he was too reckless, but those who were wise felt that the crown prince was truly a laudable figure. He hadn't bothered to display an act of false adulation. Emperor Shang didn't look at the box's contents even after eunuch she retrieved it. As it was about to put it away, the fourth prince made a sound. I wonder what type of gift the crown prince has bestowed. Crown prince, you may as well let us feast our eyes upon it. It seemed like fourth Prince Shang and Song simply just wanted a peek at what the crown prince had prepared, but it was actually because he knew distinctly that the Taiji VI estate was poor. With his estate in that condition, how could the crown prince possibly be able to produce a quality gift? 6 equals literally crown prince estate, but I found it too wordy, so I used pinyin. Letting the crown prince publicly lose face before these ranks of spectators would bring the fourth prince great pleasure. Due to an illness, fourth Prince Shang and Song's Mufei had an early passing, but with his own hands, he had rose in power. His capability was not to be underestimated. Let it be opened, Emperor Shang declared, and thus, under everyone's watchful eyes, Eunuch Su opened the brocade box. Immediately, the gift revealed itself to the multitude of gazes that were looking upon it. They were shocked, and some even stood up in disbelief. Huanamo Che glanced at the gift and then concernedly at the crown prince, thinking that in case His Majesty decided to blame the prince, Huanamo Che would protect him at all costs. Lung Yufeng saw what was inside the box and became somewhat lost, not knowing what exactly the crown prince was attempting to do, but he believed that the crown prince wasn't someone who engaged in futile activities. Lung Yufeng felt like he was too drawn to the crown prince today. The crown prince really was quite eye-catching and attention-attracting. Lung Yufeng could tell that even his good friend Huanamo Che was compelled, because Lung Yufeng had seen him look at the crown prince several times now. Amongst them, Crown Prince, today is Fu Huang's birthday commemoration. Even if your estate is poor, you cannot just gift Fu Huang a few tarnished grains of rice. What do you mean by this? Eldest Prince Shang Chengzhao berated. The other princes were also standing on the side that disapproved of the crown prince. Although the princes were not as amicable with each other as they appeared, the incompetent Shang Wuxin that they'd once disregarded was now too big of a threat. And since the title of crown prince was with Shang Wuxin, they needed to first strip him of it. Crown prince, what is the meaning of this? Emperor Shang stared at the box as his voice seemed to take on an accusatory tone. Fu Huang. Shang Wuxin went to Eunuch Su and retrieved the box before holding it high above her head so that everyone could see the mottled grains inside. These days, the South is going through a period of famine. Amongst the people, even this kind of rice is sought after. In merely a few months, the famine has led to the death of countless citizens in the South. Hence, Akin presented this gift today to bring awareness of this plight to my imperial brothers and sisters. The Taiji estate may be impecunious, but there are innocent citizens who are even more poor. Akin knows that Fu Huang wholeheartedly loves our empire's citizens, so Akin wanted to especially enlighten Fu Huang on this matter. Bang! Emperor Shang slammed a heavy fist on the table. Such a tremendous matter, and yet none of Zhan 7's agings, 8, thought to submit a report on it? Good, very good. 7 equals a form of self-address used exclusively by the emperor, referring to oneself. 8 equals a term referring to the emperor's dear subjects. Your Majesty, please cease your anger. Every minister fell to their knees. Some really didn't know, while some hadn't bothered to write a report. After all, such a troublesome predicament meant great responsibility for the officials who supervised the South. In the eyes of the privileged, the common people were of low standing. Eldest Huangxiong 9. What do you think of this gift? It allows Fu Huang to know of the people's hardships. Do you think this gift is shabby? 9 equals a term used between sons of the emperor, meaning imperial brother. While everyone held their breath, not letting out any sound, Shang Wuxin walked over to the kneeling eldest prince Shang Chengzhao, standing in front of him as she looked down on the princes. I. Eldest Prince Shang Chengzhao could not utter a word. He hadn't thought that a few measly grains would carry with it such a deep, unexpected meaning. Emperor Shang flew into a fit of anger and glared at his subjects. Something that even the crown prince knows, you all are ignorant to. It seems that you're all muddle-headed and blind. Now, what do you say should be done? No one dared to speak, and since Emperor Shang was enraged, even less people dared to stroke the dragon's whiskers. He scrutinized the officials and said in a slightly more affable voice, Huan Gongzi Tin, you are an intelligent man. What do you think should be done about this famine? Chapter 23. The Crown Prince reaps benefits. Huan Amoche unhurriedly stood up, and as he rose, he inadvertently glanced at the Crown Prince. The scholar wanted to lend a hand, so he was trying to surmise what the Crown Prince wanted to achieve by bringing up the matter of famine 1 in the south. The 1. Famine equals an extreme shortage of food. In this case, it is due to crop failure. Unfortunately, the Crown Prince's gaze did not turn to Huan Amoche at all. It was as if, regardless of what Huan Amoche said, his words would have no way of interfering with his plans. Huan Amoche felt bitterness in his heart, thinking that the Crown Prince seemed to really hate him. This was his first time being alienated and so detested by someone. Your Majesty. Huan Amoche gave a slight bow and a gentle smile, but in his heart, he was still incessantly pondering over the Crown Prince's intentions. Huan Amoche was a man of peerless intelligence, so only a brief moment of contemplation was enough for him to understand what the Crown Prince wanted to do, and Huan Amoche was willing to give the boat a push along the current. 1. And 1 equals to make use of an opportunity to achieve one's end with little effort. In other words, either HMC is giving SWX's plans a push, or he's looking to use the opportunity to bring some benefits, attention from SWX, towards himself. Chao Min, 2, believes that the best solution would be to open granaries and distribute relief grains. He proposed the simplest solution, eliciting disdain from several officials. 2 equals a form of self-address used by those with no prominent rank/position, meaning this lowly commoner. They also knew of this solution, but the thing was that this solution utilized the national treasury, and as imperial officials, they didn't dare suggest it. Only this man, who served no position in the imperial court, Huan Gongzi, 3, would state it so bluntly. 3 equals a term used to address a gentleman or the son of an official. However, there are officials who fail to send the grains, and they fill their own pockets instead. So in the end, even if the national treasury was employed to open granaries, the common populace would still starve to death on the streets. Huan Amoche voiced the dark reality of officialdom, sparing any hint of euphemism, causing the officials to pale. Therefore, the most important matter right now is to select an official who sincerely cares for the common people and is worthy of your Majesty's trust. He shall be the one to distribute the relief grains. Huan Amoche finished with a smile and then looked at the Crown Prince. As expected, the Crown Prince's gaze was on him. Although there was neither sorrow nor joy in their depths, the eyes that stared at Huan Amoche were earnest. Those eyes were breathtaking. Shang Wuxin had always been aware that this highly praised man was very intelligent, but she hadn't thought that he would be able to guess her intentions so easily. Moreover, he'd even helped her a bit. She knew that this man was the son of the left premier, 4, and the left premier, 4, equals a highly regarded position in the imperial court, known as the left-hand prime minister. There should also be a right-hand prime minister, and the concept is similar to having both a left hand and a right-hand man. Emperor Shang was particularly satisfied with Huan Immerse's call a spade, 5 manner. Huan Gongzi was wise and equally honest. It was a pity that his repetitive attempts to enlist him into the imperial court were all met with flat rejections. If Huan Immerse did join the imperial court, then even the position of the prime minister might not be considered superior to him. 5 equals to tell something as it is, frank and upfront, with no pretenses. Oh, then who does Huan Gongzi think should sent to provide relief for the south? Emperor Shang asked. This was his way of putting Huan Immerse in an important position. It was actually not the first time either. On countless occasions, Emperor Shang had turned to Huan Immerse for advice, and his suggestions were usually accepted. Huan Immerse did not disappoint him. Every time, his proposals would be reliable and foremost. Huan Immerse looked at the princes, and they each returned his gaze with somewhat nervous ones. No matter who was sent to distribute the relief grains, the benefits reaped by the chosen one would be exceptional. Countless silvers could be gained. More importantly, showing one's face while carrying out this task would ensure a good reputation, which was exactly what every single prince desired. Chao Min thinks the crown prince is the most suitable candidate. Huan Immerse's words raised 1,000 ripples. 6 equals to cause a commotion. The first one to step out in rebuttal was, unexpectedly, Huan Immerse's own father, Left Premier Darren. 7 Left Premier Huan and Ping wore imperial official robes. Although his age was no longer small, one could still perceive that in his youth, he had been a man of rarely seen beauty and appeal. 7 equals a title of respect towards a superior individual, meaning great one. He glared at Huan Immerse. Left Premier Huan and Ping knew that his son had always been a restless one, who even he was incapable of restraining. If it weren't for the fact that Huan Immerse was the only son in their household, why else would Left Premier Huan and Ping tolerate his son's disobedience? Your Majesty, please reconsider. Immerse is merely a Chao Min without an official position. How could he possibly conduct the imperial court's important matters? Immerse, why haven't you stepped down yet? Left Premier Huan and Ping snapped. Unfortunately for him, Huan Immerse paid his father no heed, causing Left Premier Huan and Ping's elderly countenance to almost lose its calm. Others envied him for having a brilliantly knowledgeable son with exceeding features. Huan Immerse was impeccably famous, yet no one knew that Left Premier Huan and Ping actually considered his son a thorn in his side. Shang Wuxin observed Left Premier Huan and Ping's pretentious behavior and could tell that the father and son pair shared a strained relationship. It seemed that Huan Immerse did not feel any filial love for his father. No wonder Huan Immerse helped her. Left Premier Huan and Ping belonged to the eldest prince's faction. His Majesty threw a discontented glance at Left Premier Huan and Ping but did not verbally reprimand him. His Majesty appeared to be far removed from the masses and reality. 8 and controlled the matter of life and death, but in fact, there were dilemmas only he would know. The imperial court was too powerful. He'd spent so many years eliminating those who gained a degree of imperial authority, but they were not enough. Far from enough. 8 equals to sit up high in a leading position, different from the rest. Huan Gongzi is the capital's top Gongzi. Who else could surpass his wisdom and wits? Emperor Shang rebuked, and then looked at the assembly of people as he said, or does someone hold another candidate in mind? Zhen 9 would like to see just who would enjoy this toilsome assignment. 9 equals a form of self-address used exclusively by the emperor, referring to oneself. Chan thinks that the eldest prince is very suitable. Left Premier Huan and Ping said. He knew that if he didn't speak up, another official undoubtedly would. 10 equals a form of self-address used by members of the imperial court, meaning this official. Left Premier's suggestion, I'm afraid, is inappropriate. Huan Immerse saw that the crown prince was about to say something, so he quickly rushed to interfere, not wanting the crown prince to go against the Left Premier. After all, the Left Premier's influence was great, so if he were to bear a grudge against the crown prince, it would be disadvantageous for the crown prince's future. Shang Wuxin's raised an eyebrow. Again, She hadn't expected that this Huan Amoche would so blatantly challenge his own father while they were in the Great Hall and continue to assist her so tenderly. If it weren't for those peach blossom eyes, she would have felt that this kind of man would be fitting to be her confidant. The famine in the south has become so severe, yet none of the other princes reported it. Crown Prince cares for the people, so of course the Crown Prince should be the one to carry out the task. If the eldest prince was truly more suitable, then where was the eldest prince at in the beginning? Chow Min would like to point out that the south is a fief belonging to the eldest prince. Huan Amoche said without a shred of fear. Even if he was facing the risk of offending a country's emperor, he would still speak similarly. It was not because he was arrogant, but simply because he held the ability. Chow Min believes the crown prince is most ideal for this task. Furthermore, his heart is one that loves the common people, and that is a blessing to them. Once he was done speaking, he sat back down. He'd done all he could now, the rest was up to His Majesty. Chen also believes that for resolving the famine in the south, the crown prince is most suitable. Bai Shangshu, an official who never picked sides and always remained neutral, spoke out. This time, he truly admired the people-loving crown prince. Regardless of whether or not the crown prince was just trying to grasp the opportunity to procure favor, he'd acknowledged the famine, which in itself made him very admirable. Emperor Shang thought for a moment before declaring, "The task of opening granaries and distributing relief grains will be handled solely by the crown prince. In 5 days, the crown prince shall take grains to the south." Shang Wuxin's eyes flashed with a faint trace of something, and that look in her eyes was spotted clearly by Huan Amoche. He took a glimpse and said, "Your Majesty, the road to the south is infested with bandits. The crown prince should have an escort." He was afraid that it would take the crown prince a long time to return from his journey to the south, and he was willing to be the aforementioned escort. However, Fu Huang 11, Akin 12, thinks that General Long would be a very good candidate. Shang Wuxin smiled. It wasn't that she was ignorant to Huan Amoche's intentions, but she really did hate those eyes. She was afraid that he'd rouse her heart. 11 equals a term used by children of the emperor, meaning Father Emperor. 12 equals a form of self-address used by sons of the emperor, meaning your son. Huan Amoche's eyes were originally crinkled in a smile, but he then lowered them as he formulated a new plan. Lung Yufeng didn't expect the crown prince to mention him, but he knew that refusal was not an option. It appeared that his plans of leaving the capital as soon as possible would have to be put aside. Then General Long will accompany Crown Prince to the south. Emperor Shang decided. You may all be dismissed. Thus, Emperor Shang's birthday commemoration was concluded, and there were many people who suffered, while the Crown Prince gained the most benefits. Several officials wanted to curry favor from the Crown Prince, but the Crown Prince took his maidservants and swiftly left the Great Hall and Palace, leaving no chances for neither the opposing nor fawning officials to do anything. However, henceforth, they all became wary of the Crown Prince. The wise ones knew that the Crown Prince was not someone to be trifled with, while even more looked at their own daughters and started to make plans. Plus 500 brownie points for Huan Machi. Chapter 24, Han Xianhao's plan. Shang Wuxin stood amidst the flowers in Taiji Estate's garden, appearing as though she was admiring the blossoms when in fact, her eyes were emotionless. The ample garden scenery seemed incapable of holding her attention for even half a minute. Crown Prince, these days the estate has been receiving a huge amount of invitations from numerous officials. Do you want to respond? Wu Ju asked. 2 days had passed since that eventful day in the palace. In those 2 days, the invitations that were sent to Taiji Estate came in piles at a time, and they all inquired after nothing but the Crown Prince's attendance for a variety of banquets. Shang Wuxin glanced at the invitations in Wu Ju's hands and selected a few at random. After skimming their contents, she placed them back into Wu Ju's hands. Shang Wuxin spoke mildly, "There's no need to pay attention to them, but we shouldn't offend them either." In her eyes, those people were like grass on top of a wall, swaying with every breeze. Even if she was trying to gain power, she wouldn't use any of those people. 1 equals a person who switches sides as easily and often as grass sways with the wind. Moreover, Among those people, a few undoubtedly were spies sent by the other princes. Since her foundation was not yet stable, she could not risk taking chances. Crown Prince Huan Gongzi has been visiting the estate a lot recently, claiming that he wants to teach Crown Prince poetry and literature, but each time he was blocked by Wu Wei. Should we take precautions against him? Actually, Wu Ju didn't think Huan Gongzi harbored any ill intentions. Contrarily, he seemed to be helping the Crown Prince instead, but Wu Ju knew that she should be on guard against anyone. Otherwise, how could she remain by the Crown Prince's side? She knew, without him telling her, that he was not a fish in a pond too. He was bound to aspire after the imperial throne. 2 equals a person who is without ambition, mediocre. Shang Wuxin was also aware of the visits Huan Moche made in the past 2 days, but she was not interested in seeing him. At the moment, he might not mean any harm, but seeing those eyes made her murderous intent towards him rise. She couldn't afford to let her emotions get out of control. She didn't answer Wu Ju's inquiry. She wanted her and Wu Wei to form their own judgments. After all, they were the people she personally took fancy to. Since you're here, why don't you show yourself? Shang Wuxin's voice suddenly became sharp. Upon hearing her words, Wu Ju's whole body straightened and her eyes darted around for a moment, afraid that there was someone who would strike out at the Crown Prince. Han Xianhao didn't expect that he'd be discovered. As an assassin, his concealment technique was undoubtedly profound. Yet, the Crown Prince had found him. The past few days in Hanxing Pavilion 1, Han Xianhao's mind had continuously and unconsciously been filled with thoughts of the Crown Prince. 3 equals Han Xianhao's residence. Right when agitation filled him, he'd heard news of the Crown Prince traveling to the south, and after mulling for a great while, he decided to visit Taiji Estate. Upon arrival, he'd realized that he didn't know what to say to the Crown Prince, so he'd quietly perched himself on a tree and peered at the Crown Prince from above. The Crown Prince wore a white robe, standing with his back as straight as a bamboo shoot, his ebony hair flitting carelessly with the wind, with a distant look in his eyes. His appearance was clearly a firm and tenacious one, yet it made Han Xianhao's heart ache. He wanted to pull that figure into his embrace. Moreover, he liked to stare at the Crown Prince like this. The more he stared, the more fascinated he became. Like? Han Xianhao was taken back by his own thoughts. Did he actually like this young Crown Prince? Or homosexuality? The idea terrified Han Xianhao a little. What he didn't know was that his dazed state was the reason Shang Wuxin was able to so quickly sense him. 4 Wuxin is indeed vigilant. I was discovered by you so quickly. An ambiguous voice sounded, and Han Xianhao could be seen landing lightly from the branch of tall tree. A crimson robe was wrapped around his slender body. The robe's collar dipped slightly, and the sight was quite alluring. There was a smile on his exquisite face. For I know. Why am I even footnoting equals the sound made from chuckling, not giggling. So, it actually doesn't sound like with long sounds. If there was an assassin from Hanxing Pavilion present, they would have been able to tell that the smile on Han Xianhao's face was much more genuine than his usual ones. Shang Wuxin glanced at Han Xianhao, unsure of why he was at Taiji Estate. Although he was her partner, be it bargaining or cooperative, she felt that he was a bit different this time. But Shang Wuxin did not dawdle on it and withdrew her gaze. I've heard that Crown Prince is heading for the south. Will I have an opportunity to see the world with you? Han Xianhao asked laughingly, but inside, he felt nervous. He knew that the famine in the south mostly likely gave rise to countless rebels. The long road there would also be infested with bandits. He was at Taiji Estate because he was worried about the Crown Prince, whose body appeared thin and weak. Shang Wuxin returned to the study without responding. In regards to Han Shuihua's suspicious reason for visiting, she was skeptical, so ignoring him was the best way to go. Seeing Shang Wuxin leave made Han Xianhao feel somewhat lost. Why did it seem like Shang Wuxin didn't like him one bit, while he seemed to really like the young prince? Despite not knowing what this type of like was, he'd never felt the same way towards anyone else before. In the past, he did not interact much with neither males nor females. Shang Wuxin was the first person he'd ever felt protective over, but it was a pity that Shang Wuxin was a male. However, even though Shang Wuxin hadn't consented. Han Xianhao laughed with a wicked intent as he stood and happily left the estate. Chapter 25. 1. Lung Yufeng's solicitude night silently fell. On a mountain slope outside of the capital, Shang Wuxin was sitting motionless on a snow-white horse. Accompanying her were 1,000 soldiers and carriages loaded with grains. They had long been waiting. Everyone was wearing standard black attire, and under her command, even the flags had been taken down. In ancient China, when those with status travel, they would raise flags that show which clan and such they belong to. Crown Prince, the provisions have already been sorted and tallied, and the soldiers are all present. Lung Yufeng arrived at the Crown Prince's side. Under the moonlight, one could discern that Lung Yufeng's whole body was clad in black, including a midnight cloak, his appearance handsome, with a pair of apathetic, inky irises and strict, thin, unsmiling lips. He emitted icy confidence that was as cold as snow. Shang Wuxin nodded, and at that moment, an official went to her and asked curiously, "Crown Prince, why must we embark at night time? And why are we not permitted to wear military clothes?" This official wasn't the only one confused. The soldiers were too, so they all perked up their ears. The man who had asked the question was about 30 years old, and his position was that of a vice minister's. This man was Bai Shangshu's son, Bai Shaolin. His looks were ordinary, but he'd inherited his father's righteous air. Under his father's instructions, he was accompanying the crown prince on this journey to the south. However, there was another reason for Bai Shaolin's compliance. He wanted to see for himself the prince his father had ever so passionately praised. Noticing that a lot of the soldiers seemed to be looking at the grains in their carriages but was actually perking their ears, Shang Wuxin bluntly said, "This time, Bin Gong is heading out to deliver provisions to the common people, not going out to amuse myself. There is no need for a grand send-off. By leaving at night, we can also catch those with ill intentions unawares. As for your clothes, military attire is very noticeable. If we wear them, wouldn't that the same as asking for bandits to attack us?" Certain parts of the mountainside inhabited bandits who were especially abhorrent to those from the capital. This was mainly due to the imperial court's incompetence, which was usually the reason behind the bandits' exiles. Those from the imperial court had repeatedly been robbed to the last pin by said bandits, but if they changed their clothes, even if the bandits were to attack, the attack wouldn't be as harsh as attacks driven by hatred. Bai Shaolin suddenly understood the crown prince's motives and promptly fell to his knees in front of Shang Wuxin. Crown Prince is wise. Chen Wan was ignorant. The other soldiers also looked at the Crown Prince with admiration. They'd heard that the Crown Prince was very wise, but when were rumors ever as true as reality? It turned out that the rumors were actually true. Lung Yufeng glanced at the Crown Prince as his heart filled with approval. If it had been him, he would have done the same too, but he'd only developed this kind of mindset through heavy experience in the battlefield. It turned out that the Crown Prince, who'd grown up in the palace, was actually capable of such thorough thinking. Lung Yufeng had to say, this Crown Prince was not someone the other princes could compare to. Faced with the soldiers' somewhat worshipping gazes, Shang Wuxin didn't feel any self-satisfaction. She propelled her horse forward, finally leading the vigorous troops forward. Wait! Suddenly, from behind them, hoofsteps sounded. She gripped her reins tightly and turned her head to see Huanamo Che in a blue robe as he galloped quickly towards her. With his masculine good looks and rare beauty, he looked undoubtedly like a well-groomed gongzi. There was a heartwarming smile on his face, and that smile elicited the feeling of caress by a spring breeze. Crown Prince, I want to go too. Ah, it's such a short update, yet it took so long, sorry. Chapter 25. 2. Lung Yufeng's solicitude. Shang Wuxin shot Lung Yufeng a look. Their departure time was a confidential matter that only those accompanying would know, yet Huanamo Che was informed of it, so it was likely that Lung Yufeng was the one who had told him. Moreover, she was aware of the close friendship the two shared. Noticing the Crown Prince's expression, Lung Yufeng couldn't figure out why he immediately felt like evading his stare. He wasn't oblivious to his best friend's interest in the Crown Prince, so when Huanamo Che incessantly asked about the journey, he had disclosed the information. Lung Yufeng honestly didn't think he did anything wrong. Although he was a general, he was a non-committal one. But today, when he met the Crown Prince's eyes, he suddenly wondered if he'd somehow committed a wrong. Shang Wuxin knew that it was already too late to intervene. After all, Huan Amoche was not an ordinary person. He was the capital's top gongzi and someone even her Fu Huang was courteous to. On top of that, she noticed Huan Amoche had even taken out her Fu Huang's written consent. Utterly helpless, she decided to not waste any more time, turned, and urged her horse onward. Huan Amoche's eyes flashed with delight before he quickly followed suit, while Lung Yufeng released a sigh and moved to keep up with the two. Originally, everyone present believed the Crown Prince to be very delicate, since although he was a male, he was nonetheless a youth, and a pampered one at that. However, seeing him push on and cross the mountain with them, their respect for him once again rose. When they came across a forest, Shang Wuxin and her two escorts stopped. They were in a rush, but they still needed to preserve their energy, lest they encounter unforeseen calamities. "We'll rest here." Shang Wuxin got off her horse, and everyone else followed. Lung Yufeng went to check on the grains before returning to take a seat next to Shang Wuxin. Huan Amoche situated himself at her unoccupied side. Bai Shaolin came over to deliver a few wrapped bingzis and addressed them with a hint of embarrassment. "Crown Prince, General, Huan Gongzi, there appears to be no animals in this forest, so we can only rely on these bingzis to appease our hunger." Bingzi literally means pancake. Bai Shaolin inwardly scolded himself for being inconsiderate. With General Long, it was all right. General Long was experienced in warfare and undoubtedly had seen bingzis numerous times, but the Crown Prince and Huan Gongzi, Bai Shaolin peeked at the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince was someone Bai Shaolin greatly admired, so he was afraid of offending him. Huan Amoche looked at the hard bingzis and thought about how, although life at Taiji Estate was not extravagant, the meals were still luxurious. More importantly, the Crown Prince's body was thin and frail. Just thinking about it gave Huan Amoche a heartache, but then he saw the Crown Prince readily take a bingzi and calmly started eating it. The Crown Prince's eating etiquette was very graceful, and his every move was an alluring one. It was as if he was holding a rare delicacy rather than a stiff cake, effectively stupefying those who were watching. After snapping out of their stupor, they felt particularly good about the prince. Huan Amoche saw that the Crown Prince seemed to have no complaints, so his heart also calmed a bit. He picked up a bingzi and started eating too. He couldn't help but sneakily glance at the Crown Prince from time to time. Huan Amoche believed that no matter what the Crown Prince did, his actions would look pleasing to the eye. This was the first time he was paying so much attention to someone. Lung Yufeng observed the way the Crown Prince placidly ate the bingzi while he began to approve even more. To think that a seemingly frail person like the Crown Prince would be so unpredictable. Lung Yufeng suddenly felt that being the Crown Prince's Grand Tutor wouldn't be so bad. 1 equals the highest official position below the Emperor, usually appointed after each new reign. A Grand Tutor's job is to provide guidance to the Emperor. Bai Shaolin, seeing that the Crown Prince did not mind their coarse food in the slightest, promptly understood why his father's assessment of the prince was so high. Bai Shaolin decided that henceforth, his loyalty belonged to the Crown Prince's faction. 2 equals literally means power/influence. In ancient China, numerous officials support different princes for the throne. Thus, each prince has their own group of supports, a faction. For many years, he'd refrained from joining any factions. It was either for one thing or another, or because none of the princes impressed him. But now, the Crown Prince was able to make Bai Shaolin willingly pledge his loyalty. Everyone hastened to get some bingzis into their stomachs and then settled down to rest. A portion stayed behind on night duty. Shang Wuxin stood up to leave and was stopped by Huan Amoche's inquiry. "Crown Prince, where are you going?" Chapter 26. Han Xianhao's blushing face and palpitating heart. "Clearly, you wanted Bingong to discover you. If Bingong failed to do so, wouldn't you be disappointed?" Shang Wuxin's voice was cold. She honestly couldn't understand why the Lord of Han Xing Pavilion was tailing her, and she could tell he didn't mean any harm either. Han Xianhao eyebrows rose. Why is Wuxin so intelligent? As he spoke, He itched to move closer, but he was barely able to procure an inch before an icy glare from Shang Wuxin halted him. Han Xianhao felt like he could go as far as to say that if he took even one step closer, Shang Wuxin would definitely make a move to kill him. Since you're here, help Bingong with a task. Shang Wuxin gazed at the moon, the tone of her voice strange. This will neutralize one of the 3 favors you owe me. She had originally been contemplating on who to send out for that task, and now someone had delivered himself to her doorstep. Interest piqued, Han Xianhao immediately spoke. Whatever Wuxin wants accomplished, you only need to say it. You need not mention the favors. After all, we are partners, are we not? Inside, he knew that if all 3 of the favors he owed were fulfilled, Shang Wuxin would no longer have anything to do with him. How could he allow that to happen? For this task, I'll need you to return to the capital. She felt skeptical of his selfless proclamation, but since he himself said that the 3 favors wouldn't be implicated, why try to convince him otherwise? If she did, wouldn't she be giving herself the short end of the stick? What is it? Han Xianhao questioned incredulously. He'd shadowed the whole way because he wanted to be at Wuxin's side, but now he was being asked to go back. His heart was tense, and he was even wondering if Wuxin had done it on purpose. Shang Wuxin glanced at Han Xianhao, whose reluctance was clear as day, and her lips twitched. You don't want to? Her eyes laden with displeasure. This man owed her 3 favors, and yet he was repudiating his debts. Should she dispose of him? How could Han Xianhao possibly not notice the thick, murderous intent flashing in Shang Wuxin's eyes? Though bitterness trickled into his heart, he spoke with a smile. This task, if Wuxin wants me to complete it, I can. However, I have one condition. Once those words fell, he threw Shang Wuxin a suggestive wink. The smooth gesture caused her to freeze as her heart gasped with appreciation. He truly was a Yaoni-eyed one. 1 equals a term referring to an enchanting being capable of deluding others into doing questionable things, similar to a seductress. This term is commonly translated as evildoer, but I think that translation is lacking, so I stuck with the Chinese. Shang Wuxin sized him up, and her voice contained a sliver of interest. Oh, mind sharing what your condition is? For him to propose a condition did not go beyond her expectations at all, as she should have done the same too. She just didn't know how considerable his condition would be. Han Xianhao braved Shang Wuxin's murderous eyes and slowly drew near. But he knew his limits, so he kept his hands to himself. With their close proximity came a very faint but aromatic fragrance. He couldn't help but sniff a few more times, knowing it was Shang Wuxin's natural body scent, and finding it odd that a young male would give off such a nice scent. However, he really did like this scent. From now on, I wish for you to call me by my name, Xianhao. He suppressed the urge to move closer still. If you agree, I'll return to the capital and help you with your task. How about it? And at this point, I don't think we're just partners anymore. We're friends. Shang Wuxin took a step back, slightly widening the distance between them. Han Xianhao could no longer detect that subtly elegant scent and felt a sense of loss, but nonetheless, he continued to smile as he gazed at Shang Wuxin. He knew the youth was an exceedingly intelligent individual, but his request did not cross any lines. Sure enough, Shang Wuxin only pondered briefly before saying, Then, Xianhao, I thank you for your assistance. The implication behind her words was clear. She'd extracted Bingong from her speech, which meant she was willing, at least on a surface level, to acknowledge Han Xianhao as a friend. On the other hand, there was no way of knowing her real thoughts. Han Xianhao was delighted to hear his name fall from Shang Wuxin's lips. His own red lips arched into a wide grin, and his eyes sparkled. A completely unrestrained display of beauteousness, so brilliant it was suffocating. A perplexed expression surfaced on Shang Wuxin's face as she stared at him. It was merely a name, so why was this man happy to such an extent? Forget it, as long as her purpose was satisfied, nothing else concerned her. All right, what do you need me to return for? Joy brimmed Han Xianhao's countenance. From their current location, it wouldn't take long to reach the capital. If the task was accomplished quickly, he could still catch up. Shang Wuxin leaned in, placed her lips beside his ear, and used a leisurely tone to divulge her plans. Alas, He could only register the sweet aroma emanating from Shang Wuxin's body, and the warm breath tickling his ears sent his heart into chaos. Understood? After her instructions were given, she caught sight of Han Xianhao's red cheeks and stepped back. He was rather befuddled. What did you say? Shang Wuxin's expression showed that she was not amused, but she drew closer again and repeated her instructions. This time, although Han Xianhao's heartbeat was still palpitating uncontrollably, he exerted great effort to listen. The more he heard, the colder his face became. Wuxin, rest assured. I will definitely do a good job. He suppressed the subservient smile that threatened to blossom on his face. I'll take my leave now. Take good care of yourself. The man disappeared with a reassuring smile, and as Shang Wuxin watched him vanish, the corners of her lips rose in an evil tilt. When she returned to the encampment, she immediately spotted Lung Yufeng and Huanamo Che. Instead of resting, they were standing upright at the outer ring of the encampment, as though waiting for her. Seeing that, an inkling of enlightenment crept into her heart. Crown Prince, they called out. Since they were outside of the imperial capital, they relinquished some of the compulsory courtesy they normally enforced. Shang Wuxin waited for their questions, and as expected, Huanamo Che opened his mouth to ask, Crown Prince. Henceforth, it would be best if you refrain from straying too far. Chaomin, too, is not an enemy, at least, not crown princes. 2. Equals a form of self-address used by those with no prominent rank/position, meaning this lowly commoner. For the two men to station themselves at the outer ring of the encampment, Shang Wuxin realized it must have been because they saw her with Han Xianhao. The lake she'd been standing near could be seen from the trio's current spot, which was the top of a high terrain. Han Xianhao's face might have been too far away to recognize, but his interactions with Shang Wuxin were easily perceived. You both should rest. She said nothing more and headed straight for a large tree, closing her eyes once she made herself comfortable. The two men followed and sat themselves at either sides of the crown prince, intending to rest, but were both enthralled. When the crown prince's eyes were closed, his sharp and silent aura of death were diminished, leaving behind only a pale and slim being, akin to an indolent yet seductive kitten. Lung Yufeng and Huanamo Che were both struck with the urge to clasp the crown prince in their own arms and nurture him. Simultaneously, they removed their outer robes, and when they both leaned toward to drape their own robe over the crown prince, they exchanged an embarrassment look. 2 layers of clothing concurrently appeared on the prince's body and instantaneously added warmth to his body. Shang Wuxin's eyelashes quivered briefly and then eased. The two men who gave her their outer robes also shut their eyes. Chapter 27. Lung Yufeng's change. It was early morning. Before sunrise, the sky was already brightening. Promptly after opening their eyes, Lung Yufeng and Huanamo Che turned to look at the crown prince, only to find him missing while the clothes they had draped on him were left behind. When the two men reached out to retrieve their respective outer robes, they found their clothes cool and slightly dampened by morning vapor. They immediately realized the crown prince had awoken much earlier than they did. Lung Yufeng and Huanamo Che hastily threw on their outer robes and set out to look for the crown prince. Both were oblivious to the nature of the anxiety on their faces and were even more clueless as to why they cared so much about someone they knew for such a brief time. Crown Prince. They found Shang Wuxin standing not far from their initial spot. Shang Wuxin was inspecting the provision carriages. She had not rested at all the night before because there were too many unreliable individuals around her, and not only was she restless, but she was also weighed down by the importance of her disaster relief assignment, so how could she possibly fall asleep? Lung Yufeng and Huanamo Che were actually also vigilant, but the faint aroma emanating from the figure between them had lulled them to sleep. Even so, if they had sensed the slightest of movements, they would have been the first ones to rouse. Shang Wuxin glanced at the two and nodded. They both felt rather embarrassed, for they held the responsibility of protecting the crown prince, yet they had unexpectedly been unaware of his awakening. Instruct the troops to quickly eat something and then we'll set off, Shang Wuxin commanded, knowing the longer they delayed their arrival, the more innocent lives would be lost to hunger. Lung Yufeng went to gather the troops while Huanamo Che glanced at the crown prince and then disappeared into the forest. Shang Wuxin was aware of his departure but did not stop him nor worry about him, choosing instead to focus on doing her own thing. Meanwhile, Lung Yufeng was somewhat perplexed when he saw his friend going deeper into the forest, but he knew Huanamo Che was actually not as gentle as he appeared and that he was quite skilled in martial arts, so there was nothing to worry about. Lung Yufeng thought for a moment before unfastening his water pouch from his horse and heading to the lake to fill the pouch with clean water. "Crown Prince, you should take a drink," he said, his voice slightly stiff as he passed the water pouch in his hands to Shang Wuxin. Lung Yufeng rarely took care of others, however. Since the beginning of their journey, he had not seen the Crown Prince take one sip of water. Upon closer inspection, he'd found out the prince did not bring along a water pouch. Shang Wuxin paused on her way to another provision carriage and glanced at Lung Yufeng's rigid expression, not expecting this cold-looking general to be so attentive. She was indeed thirsty, so she accepted the offered pouch and opened her mouth to swallow a few small gulps. "Crown." The words died in Lung Yufeng's throat. He was going to say that the water pouch was his and that he drank from it prior, but then he saw the Crown Prince directly drink from the pouch. The Crown Prince drank water in a rather quiet and gentle way, unlike other men, who guzzled large mouthfuls at a time. Lung Yufeng's gaze fell on the Crown Prince's lips, which he found were light pink. Those light pink lips were pressed against the opening of Lung Yufeng's water pouch, and thinking he also drank in the same manner, his eyes abruptly widened. He thought the Crown Prince's lips looked especially nice, albeit a little pale. Although Lung Yufeng never really paid close attention to the lips of other people, he subconsciously thought the Crown Prince's lips had to be the best. While Lung Yufeng was being annoyed by his own thoughts, his water pouch swiftly appeared before him, and Shang Wuxin's cold voice sounded. "Thank you." Lung Yufeng was taken back, for he honestly hadn't thought a person like the Crown Prince would be one to express thanks. In the end, just what kind of person was the Crown Prince? He was obviously an exceedingly cold, inhuman youth, yet his words and actions were always contrary to Lung Yufeng's expectations. Lung Yufeng suddenly wanted to get a deeper understanding of the Crown Prince. Shang Wuxin looked at Lung Yufeng strangely, wondering why he was holding the water pouch stiffly and not doing anything with it. She brushed the thought aside and continued to do her own thing. At this moment, Huanamo Che, who was gone for a while, emerged from the forest. His robes were still blue, but because of the dew from the forest's trees, the hems of his robes were dampened. In his hand, he held a few freshly picked wild fruits. When he spotted Shang Wuxin, he walked over with a smile. "Crown Prince, here's a freshly picked fruit." Yesterday evening, he was troubled by the sight of the Crown Prince eating a bingzi. When he imagined how they would have to eat bingzis again for breakfast, he decided to go out and pick fruits to appease their hunger with instead. Shang Wuxin glanced at the fruits and made no move to take them. She started to walk away, but Huanamo Che managed to forcibly stuff 2 fruits into her hands, and he'd even wiped those 2 fruits clean on his own clothes before giving them to her. Wordlessly, she walked away with those 2 fruits in her possession, leaving Huanamo Che to feel helpless towards her emotionless disregard of his goodwill. Still, Huanamo Che couldn't control his desire to do things for the Crown Prince. "Here, this one's for you. Don't say bin gongzi one isn, tea friend enough." Huanamo Che took out another duplet of fruits and tossed them to Lung Yufeng. The latter laughed in his heart, vaguely understanding why his friend's mood was unpleasant. This Crown Prince it seems like he held too much influence over the 2 men. Was that a good thing or bad thing? Lung Yufeng even went as far as to think that if he continued to accompany the prince, he would end up doing some unimaginable things. Afterwards, Huanamo Che felt thirsty and planned to grab Lung Yufeng's water pouch. Actually, they were both more or less people who cared about cleanliness, and he was no exception, but he and Lung Yufeng counted as life-and-death friends. Furthermore, the times they shared wine from the same flagon was not just once or twice either. Excluding his good friend, Huanamo Che really didn't use other people's things. Lung Yufeng saw through Huanamo Che's intentions and deftly avoided the latter's. Then he uncapped the water pouch and downed its contents. Remembering the Crown Prince, Lung Yufeng's face flushed slightly. "No water left here. Go drink from your own." he said before leaving, afraid Huanamoche would notice his red cheeks. Odd too, Huanamoche exclaimed as he watched his friend hurry away. He bit into the remaining fruit in his hand. When his mouth filled with a sour taste, he immediately turned to look at the crown prince, only to find him eating as though he didn't detect the sourness. He just ate it like that, halting Huanamoche, who was on his way to stop him. It looks like he discovered the crown prince's taste for sour foods. Could that be counted as progress? Chapter 28. Mountain Lodge. A handful of 1,000-people troops rode along a secluded pathway. As for why they chose a pathway, that was because they needed to avoid being sighted. Furthermore, everyone knew that if they approached the south in a grand and imposing manner, they would likely get ambushed and separated before they could reach their destination. Crown Prince, there is an inn ahead. Will we be resting in the inn tonight? Lung Yufeng returned on his horse. They'd already traveled for 3 days and stayed overnight in the forest for all 3. Although nobody didn't really mind, after seeing the pale crown prince, Lung Yufeng hadn't been able to resist riding ahead to inquire around. There's actually an inn in such a remote place. Looks like this inn isn't simple. Huanamoche's gentle smile was mingled with silken coldness, but he looked at Shang Wuxin and knew that Shang Wuxin's decision was the most important and resolute. Shang Wuxin looked skeptically at Lung Yufeng. Right now, their best option was to bivouac in the forest, and she believed he was also very clear on that. So why was he doing this? She didn't feel any malice. Can you guarantee its safety? She asked. She didn't ask about the dangers. She knew that since Lung Yufeng brought up the inn, that meant he had a certain grasp on its nature. This man, although he'd been indifferent for the past few days, he was thoughtful. Lung Yufeng peered at the crown prince's incomparably exquisite face. These few days, he dared not gaze at the prince excessively, but the prince seemed to have a bewitching charm that attracted attention. At night, Lung Yufeng would feel restless and crack open his eyes to furtively stare at the slumbering crown prince. The darkness concealed Lung Yufeng's burning gaze, but did nothing to counter his rapidly skipping heartbeat. I can, he affirmed. He originally wanted to say more, but all that came out of his mouth were those 2 icy words. However, beside him, Huanamoche noticed the warmth in his friend's voice and wrinkled his eyebrows, feeling a bit uncomfortable in his heart. Shang Wuxin nodded. Bai Shaolin gathered some people to arrange for accommodations. After all, their party did not just consist of a few people, but a few thousands of people, so even with an inn, it would be impossible to accommodate everyone. Huanamoche noticed he seemed to be ignored. He opened his mouth and said laughingly, I'm afraid it'll take another 7 or 8 days to reach the south. Translator change. Vin Gurley, I'm afraid we'll be very busy from now on, Lung Yufeng said with a sigh, but his tone betrayed his eagerness to go all out. After all, they'd been walking quickly for the past 3 days, but after crossing those mountain woods, they would reach the mountain bandits' territory. In the coming days, the journey wouldn't be as easy and relaxed. Shang Wuxin urged the horse, leading everyone to the remote inn. The inn appeared to be awfully shabby, and with only a few rooms. Fortunately, however, it had a courtyard, and at nightfall, the soldiers could also rest inside it. Shang Wuxin sized up the inn at a glance. Her eyes were still so deep, one couldn't see the bottom. Pitch black and profound like a serene deep pool without any ripples. Bai Shaolin was already waiting outside the inn since earlier. Seeing Shang Wuxin, he stepped forward. Gongzi, one because they were outside. Shang Wuxin had already instructed everyone not to reveal their identities. But looking at the innkeeper's eyes now, Shang Wuxin could clearly see through her. Oh my, distinguished guests, please come in quickly, quickly. Waiters, serve some tea without delay. The kitchen has already prepared food. In charge of the inn was a graceful middle-aged woman. She was looking at them as if she was seeing money. As she was speaking, she wanted to get closer to Shang Wuxin, but Lung Yufeng and Huanamoche blocked her path. Our Gongzi too doesn't like people approaching him. Just concentrate on preparing the meals, that's good enough. Seeing that General Long and Huan Gongzi didn't have good expressions, Bai Shaolin hastened to give instructions. The innkeeper laughed a few times, then told the waiters to receive the guests. She went to urge the kitchen for the meals, while the waiters, also looking at everyone with big smiles covering their whole faces, endlessly served the soldiers tea or handed them water. "Gongzi, your room is ready," Bai Shaolin said. Although he wanted to find a nice room at all costs, the inn was in this condition. He still made people clean the room up everywhere, until he could let the crown prince reluctantly put up with it and rest inside. Shang Wuxin nodded, then glanced at Lung Yufeng and Huanamo Che, and the three of them entered the well-prepared room. "You noticed?" Shang Wuxin asked as she pondered. Originally, she was prepared to wait a while. She didn't expect that some people would lose their patience so quickly. Huanamo Che sat at Shang Wuxin's left side. He poured a cup of water for her and carefully made sure the water didn't have anything peculiar inside before he felt reassured. After pouring himself a cup, he spoke straightforwardly. "In this inn, whether it's the innkeeper or the waiters, all of them know decent martial arts." From the moment Huanamo Che entered the inn, he realized it wasn't an ordinary inn. Even though the innkeeper successfully camouflaged herself as a greedy merchant, aptitude and caution flashed through her eyes, making Huanamo Che understand things at a glance. Moreover, when the innkeeper left, her measured pace was similar to that of a martial arts practitioner. Also, all the waiters' technique in wiping the tables or pouring the tea hinted that they were greatly unaccustomed to the task. More importantly, Huanamo Che discovered that all the waiters had thick calluses in the web between their thumb and forefinger. Shang Wuxin's glance swept over Huanamo Che. He unexpectedly surprised her. She already knew he wasn't an ordinary person. Even if he looked like a precious, overly pampered young master from the capital, at present, Shang Wuxin was aware that Huanamo Che wasn't simple at all. On the contrary, he was immeasurably deep. Seeing the crown prince's line of sight on himself, Huanamo Che suddenly held his breath. He hoped this line of sight would stay on him for a while longer, but unfortunately, the crown prince's pair of clear as ice black eyes stopped over him for a second, then immediately left. "These people aren't mountain bandits," Lung Yufeng stated with certainty, but thinking a bit more, he added an explanation. "One can tell at a glance that these people are well trained, and it's absolutely impossible for mountain bandits to reach this level. Furthermore, they're clearly here for us, but it's unlikely that the mountain bandits know we're delivering grains to the south." After Lung Yufeng was done speaking, both he and Huanamo Che looked at the crown prince. They wanted to find out what he would do, but based on their reasoning, they also knew the present predicament was definitely not so simple. Within the span of a single breath, Shang Wuxin's chilly voice resounded, accompanied by a difficult-to-detect trace of ruthlessness. "Go inform Bai Shaolin to pay attention to the meals tonight. If anyone gets drugged, tell him he no longer needs to return to the capital," Shang Wuxin said with a faint smile. Not returning to the capital meant that if he couldn't even accomplish this small thing, he would be directly discarded. Originally, Lung Yufeng should have gone for this task, but Huanamo Che rushed to do it. In the past, he simply disdained getting involved in the imperial court's matters. But now he thought that only getting himself involved in those matters would perhaps make the crown prince gaze at him a few more times like earlier. "Tonight," Shang Wuxin mumbled in a low voice, "will be fun." Lung Yufeng was looking at the crown prince, who was deep in thought over something with his head lowered. He was dressed in white brocade clothes with black edges. His black hair was like a waterfall, a jade hairpin holding it up as it draped over his shoulders and spilled over his back. He gave a cold impression, unable to be melted. Pale red lips, profound eyes, extraordinarily dignified, giving off a trace of ice-cold, bewitching flavor. A matchless cool elegance. As he looked on, Lung Yufeng got somewhat obsessed. He was even imagining, if the crown prince didn't have that kind of chilly manner, he ought to have such a graceful bearing. Shang Wuxin suddenly raised her head and looked at Lung Yufeng as she approached him, stopping a short distance away from him. "General Long won't go rest?" Startled, Lung Yufeng immediately retreated several steps. Previously, whether he was facing thousands of enemy soldiers or facing life and death, Lung Yufeng had never retreated. But now, simply because the crown prince got near, Lung Yufeng became a little terrified and withdrew several steps. He was afraid the crown prince would find out about those indistinct, unbearable thoughts of his. He was even more afraid that he wouldn't be able to restrain himself. As for what he would be unable to restrain, even he didn't know. Without saying a word, Lung Yufeng hurriedly walked out of the room. Looking at Lung Yufeng, who seemed frightened, Shang Wuxin felt a little helpless. Was she too scary, frightening such a valiant general? Chapter 29. The Crown Prince's plan at dinner. The soldiers ate till they were full. For the past few days, all they'd had were the flat cakes to appease their hunger. Now that there was cooked rice and hot dishes, everyone was overjoyed as they quickly finished up the food and went to rest up. The rooms in the inn were used by Lung Yufeng and the others. The soldiers positioned themselves around the carts with grains, and while they guarded, they fell asleep. Just a moment later, several people came out of the kitchen. Those people were precisely the innkeeper and the waiters. To actually think this crown prince has any ability. He's unexpectedly so easy to fool, still wet behind the ears. The female innkeeper said with a sneer as she looked at the fallen soldiers. Their master had even told them to be extra careful, and that the crown prince couldn't be underestimated. But to her, the crown prince seemed like a child who hadn't seen the world yet. Tell everyone to carry off the grain first, the innkeeper instructed. If so many grains entered her master's hands, who knew how much money they would obtain? More importantly, if the crown prince lost all the grains this time, perhaps his position as crown prince would be snatched away. When the innkeeper was done speaking, she took a few men disguised as waiters along and walked toward the crown prince's room. She kicked open the door, but it wasn't the unconscious prince she saw. Rather, it was the two extremely handsome men she had met during the day. The two men stood at the entrance, looking at her indifferently. The innkeeper knew at a glance that the situation was all wrong and that she had been revealed as an enemy. She promptly turned her head to look at the courtyard, and sure enough, those previously sleeping soldiers all stood up, each one of them with abundant vigor and brimming with killing intent. None of them appeared to be drugged and confused. Bad luck? The innkeeper cursed beneath her breath, then looked toward the big bed obstructed by the separating screen. Haha, it turns out the crown prince already knew everything. The crown prince really is a good strategist. However, even if you know, so what? You're still sure to lose today. Oh. A voice came from behind the screen, chilly, but melodious and pleasant to the ear. Then, the sound of someone getting up could be heard and everyone's eyes focused on the separating screen. The Crown Prince Shang Wuxin thus showed up within everyone's sight. The Crown Prince's graceful physique appeared in such a crude and simple room, yet he was like a deity overlooking the world, watching the innkeeper and her people as though looking down on mere mortals beneath him. Lose? Bingong won unexpectedly wasn't aware Bingong will lose. Shang Wuxin came to the table and sat down while Lung Yufeng and Huanamoche stood at her sides to keep guard. The two of them didn't know the Crown Prince practiced martial arts. They were afraid that someone would injure him. A moment later, a couple of hundred black-clad men poured outside, surrounding the inn entirely. Seeing the several hundred people, the female innkeeper's knitted brows somewhat loosened, but she still immediately commanded, Kill the Crown Prince. Destroy the grains. Unfortunately, the possibility of seizing the grains tonight seemed unlikely. In that case, the threat of them getting ruined would make it impossible for the Crown Prince to withdraw. Actually broadened Bingong's vision. Such a tiny inn could hide so many people. Watching the few hundred people emerging, Shang Wuxin didn't look concerned at all. If those several thousand soldiers couldn't even resolve such a matter, she would really get a headache. Kill. Shang Wuxin slammed the small teacup in her hand on top of the table, her entire being suddenly changed to sharp and fierce. The order she issued also contained an overwhelmingly intimidating power. Bai Shaolin bellowed in a great voice, leading a few hundred soldiers in a clash against the black-clad men, while the remaining soldiers protected the grains. Leading some waiters with comparatively high martial arts, the innkeeper attacked the Crown Prince Shang Wuxin, but before they managed to approach, Lung Yufeng and Huanamoche blocked their path, while Shang Wuxin, as if she didn't see the various scenes of battle around her, and seemingly nauseated by the smell of blood, still elegantly tasted the crude tea. Although Lung Yufeng and Huanamoche were outnumbered, They were far more skilled in martial arts than those people who weren't even worth a mention in their eyes in the first place. While fighting, they were paying attention to Shang Wuxin's circumstances. When they saw that Shang Wuxin was regarding the bloody scenes around as some common occurrence, their chests felt suffocated. Who knew why? Seeing the crown prince like that made their hearts ache for him. Mere moments later, the black-clad men were thoroughly eliminated, leaving only the female innkeeper alive. If it weren't for Shang Wuxin saying she wanted her alive, Leng Yufeng would have already killed her. Currently, 2 soldiers were holding the innkeeper and pressing her acupoints in order to prevent her from suiciding. The woman was looking toward the outside somewhat anxiously. Her originally victorious expression was gone without a trace. She realized that something was wrong. Could it be? The innkeeper looked at the peacefully sitting crown prince. Her voice held alarm as she asked, Did you know everything? Is it your doing? The soldiers inside the courtyard were looking at the innkeeper in confusion, wondering what she was talking about. But Leng Yufeng and Huan Moche faintly came to realize something. Both of them turned to Shang Wuxin. She didn't leave them hanging, but directly started speaking. Yes, it is indeed Bungong's doing. What a pity. Those helpers your master has sent from the capital. I wonder whether they're dead without an entire corpse, or gone without a trace, HM? From the time Shang Wuxin had set off from the capital, she had known that there would definitely be a prince who'd restlessly wish to get rid of her during the journey. But even the prince wouldn't be able to organize a lot of manpower along the road so quickly. As a result, it was certain he would send more subordinates to catch up from the capital. She originally intended to make Wu Wei lead a part of their newly trained force to dispose of them, but had then bumped into Han Xian how just right. Shang Wuxin was all too clear about just how powerful Han Xing Pavilion was, so she immediately passed the duty over to Han Xian Hao. He truly didn't disappoint her. You actually killed them all, the innkeeper said in disbelief. Several hundred subordinates had been lying in ambush around the inn, but the master had also sent several hundred highly trained people from the capital to assist them. But no one anticipated that the crown prince would eliminate them before they could even leave the capital. He really was formidable. That kind of youngster could unexpectedly conceal himself for so many years. The innkeeper suddenly felt the possibility that her master would capture the crown prince's position in the future was too slim. Haha, seems like it was me who lost today. Kill me or hack me as you like. But if you want me to betray my master, that's impossible. The woman raised her head and stated in a loud voice. In her opinion, the crown prince had spared her life precisely in order to make her disclose the name of her master, but it was only natural that she would never betray him. Ben Gong also knows you wouldn't betray your master. Shang Wuxin stood up to arrive at the innkeeper's side, her voice as sweet-sounding as a stream of water running through the mountain, yet saturated with bone-chilling cold. Therefore, Ben Gong only left you alive to look at your dismayed expression. Anyway, your dejected and frightened expression is really pleasing to Ben Gong. Looking at the demon-like demeanor of the crown prince, everyone felt a slight chill rising in their hearts. They didn't expect the crown prince had left that woman alive for such a wicked reason. However, Leng Yufeng and Huan Moche were watching the crown prince with an indistinctly adoring expression. They felt this kind of crown prince was not only not scary, but rather much more real. The crown prince seemed to have let them see him like this on purpose. Shang Wuxin extended a pale hand and gently caressed the innkeeper's incredulous eyes, said a few words next to her ear, then walked back behind the separating screen. In the meantime, everyone witnessed the innkeeper suddenly die, and moreover, she still held a grievance in her open eyes. Everyone was puzzled, but Leng Yufeng and Huan Moche knew that the crown prince had mentioned a single person's name in the woman's ear just now. And when she heard that name, she opened her eyes wide in horror and died. Perhaps other people wouldn't be able to notice, but they could tell that when the crown prince caressed the woman's eyes, he pressed her lethal acupoint. That was why she died with her eyes still open. Clean up here, Leng Yufeng commanded, then stared at the separating screen motionlessly. Once the room was clean, he left and closed the door, but both him and Huan Moche didn't go back to their rooms. Rather, they stood at the entrance outside like the most loyal knights guarding their own king. Without further ado, Bai Shaolin asks Shang Wuxin where they're going to stay for the night. Everyone is impressed and in awe of her wits, while she herself is in a bad mood, feeling unwell because of how much they rushed the journey. Coupled with the poison inside her, it's even worse. Huanamoche notices, of course, and wants to help her massage her temples, but he holds himself back knowing if he got close, he wouldn't be able to control himself. On the other hand, Lung Yufeng straight up asks if the crown prince is feeling unwell. This causes Huanamoche to freeze up because he thinks that his friend, like himself, is paying a bit too much attention to the crown prince these days. The inquiry causes everyone to notice that Shang Wuxin looks paler than usual, and they begin worrying. She ignores them and calmly tells them to stop and rest where they are. They will depart at night time, and she predicts there will be a massacre on this very night. So she tells them to tighten their defenses and keep an eye out. Then, she jumps off her horse and leaps onto a tree branch, where she proceeds to close her eyes and rest. Soon after, 2 more figures join her, and she doesn't even have to guess to know who they are. The past few days, they had been shadowing her like protective bodyguards. Huanamoche finally gives in and reaches out to massage her, but her eyes suddenly shoot open, and she grabs his hand, just about to break it when she realizes he's not resisting at all. She lets go and meets his peach blossom eyes. She warns him coldly to not touch her so casually. The 2 men obediently comply and relax next to her. At night, she opens her eyes and momentarily mesmerizes the 2. She asks if everyone is ready, upon which Lung Yufeng answers a yes. He feels conflicted about what he has to do next, but he also wants to know if the feeling he gets towards the crown prince will disappear if he's away from her for a period of time. When Shang Wuxin proposes that Huanamoche accompany Lung Yufeng, both men reject. Huanamoche covers up his flustered state by saying he has to stay behind to protect her. As it turns out, Lung Yufeng has to lead a good chunk of soldiers down a different road so they can all meet up again later in the south. It will ensure their safety, and since Shang Wuxin has something else to do, she doesn't want Huanamoche around either. She nods and tells Lung Yufeng to be careful on the road, which catches him off guard, and he leaves without replying. A few moments later, he curses in defeat. A man named Helanjin asks Lung Yufeng what's wrong, and he responds with nothing as he scolds himself for forgetting to bid the crown prince farewell. Helanjin, who has been with Lung Yufeng since they were children and understands him very well, notices something is off about Lung Yufeng, but he is unable to put his finger on it. Lung Yufeng and Shang Wuxin part ways. Suddenly, a group of bandits jump out of nowhere and eye the grains on Shang Wuxin's carriages. Shang Wuxin abruptly smiles and easily wreaks havoc in Huanamoche's heart. Meanwhile, she tells the bandit, "How amusing." The bandit is bald, and he reminds her of Eunuch Hai, an honest person pretending to be tough. The bandits are confused at her reaction, and before they can finish threatening her, the one who spoke in the beginning is abruptly killed. Chapter 31. Gathering followers. As soon as the crown prince came out, the problem was resolved. It appears to this prince that you're quite comfortable. Are you going to surrender? Shang Wuxin asked as she looked at the chubby mountain bandit. His words earlier had improved her mood just a bit, so she decided to spare his life. The chubby mountain bandit was awfully frightened by the youth standing before him and knew he had kicked an iron plate. Earlier, when he saw that the entourage had food and few people, he'd intended to rob them. The sight of a frail-looking youth leading it had only made the idea more tempting. Who would have expected that youth to be such a lord? You all can go. Today, I was blind and disturbed you. Oh great ones, this lowly one will scram right away. The chubby bandit bowed as his head bobbed up and down. Most would look down on this bandit's methods, but Shang Wuxin looked upon him with praise. One should know their limits, and clearly, this bandit was clever enough to know what he had to do. Huanamoche took one look at the expression in the crown prince's eyes and understood that the crown prince was very satisfied with the bandit, and he too realized how shrewd the bandit was. The bandit knew nothing of their identities but called them, "Oh great ones," nonetheless, showing that he was sharp-witted. If a person as versatile as him was given the appropriate platform, he would undoubtedly be able to become a person smooth and slick in establishing social relations. Ben Gong suddenly doesn't want to leave. Shang Wuxin dismounted, and so did Juana Moche and the rest. She was quite satisfied with this particular group of soldiers and began to contemplate whether or not to take them under her wing. Ben Gong? The chubby bandit looked fearfully at the youth. The only person who would call themselves Ben Gong was the recently well-known crown prince. The bandit thought he'd offended a few officials, not the crown prince himself. Kill them. My brothers, kill. He roared. He knew that if he let these people go, his brothers would all lose their lives later on. It would be better to kill the entourage now and erase all traces of the events, since he wasn't naive enough to believe that the crown prince would truly let them go. Interesting. The corners of Shang Wuxin's curved into a cold smile before she launched herself at the bandits, followed by Juana Moche, who was still worried despite knowing the crown prince practiced martial arts. Behind them, the soldiers charged in too as to not lose face for their prince. Shang Wuxin was without a weapon. Since arriving to this world not too long ago, she had not yet found a handy weapon. To people like her, their weapons were no different from their second self, so she was not in a rush to find hers. The matter required the workings of fate. Every time she faced a bandit, she would either break their arms or legs, but she inflicted only physical injuries. That way, the bandits would still be able to continue with their everyday lives. Spare their lives, she commanded suddenly. Her voice contained an undefiable tone to it. Although the soldiers were confused, no one disobeyed. They continued fighting with their weapons, but did not aim to inflict life-threatening injuries. The mountain bandits were strong, but compared to the well-trained soldiers of the entourage, they were still lacking. Moreover, the soldiers this time were all exceptional, as they were taken from the imperial palace. Before long, all of the bandits were on the ground howling. The chubby mountain bandit noticed that all of his brothers were injured, but none had died. His heart quivered, and he held his injured shoulder as he turned to ask, "What are Crown Prince's intentions? As long as it's something this lowly one is capable of, this lowly one will go through fire and water to accomplish it." Shang Wuxin scrutinized him carefully before asking, "What's your name? Are you the leader of this mountain?" "Yes. This lowly one is Linjiar, the leader of this mountain." Linjiar fell to his knees before the youth. He wanted to grab onto the youth's clean robes, but was intercepted by a long sword. Looking up, he caught sight of another exceptionally beautiful gentleman. However, the gentleman was looking at him with an extremely cold smile. Linjiar dared not get too close to the crown prince again. "Linjiar, this prince wants you." Shang Wuxin's words surprised everyone, and they all started wondering what the crown prince was thinking. Juana Moche, on the other hand, wasn't very happy. He knew well that the crown prince didn't mean anything, but he still couldn't stand hearing the crown prince say something like that to someone else. "Me?" Linjiar embraced himself in fear. "Crown prince, please spare this lowly one. This lowly one is ugly and will dirty your highness. Look." He suddenly pointed at Juana Moche. "This gentleman is tall, stately, and handsome. He is much more compatible with your highness and will definitely be able to satisfy your highness too." Everyone else was bewildered, but they caught on nonetheless. Several soldiers had to stifle their laughs. Meanwhile, Juana Moche turned so red that even his neck was flushed. He didn't want to kill Linjiar anymore. As the matter of fact, he started to feel a bit anticipative. "Nonsense." Suddenly, an angry woman's voice sounded. A black-robed woman appeared before them. Her hair was tied in a high pony, and several hundred people were following behind her. The soldiers all raised their weapons in preparation to protect the crown prince. There was a hideous scar on the woman's cheek, but she did nothing to conceal it. Her entire person emanated the beauty of self-assurance. Each of the individuals behind her was dressed in black, with a single Shang character sewed on their robes. The woman led them to the crown prince and knelt down. "Your Highness, your subordinate has arrived," Wu Wei reported excitedly. When she received the crown prince's message a few days ago, she had been unbelievably happy. The crown prince didn't take her, Wu Ju, or any of his followers along on the trip to the south, so she had been very worried. The instant she received the crown prince's message, she had grabbed a few hundred followers and hurried over. And yet, the first thing she heard upon arrival was those impudent words. Shang Wuxin surveyed the people standing before her, and each one immediately straightened up and tried to look their best. Some of them had been trained by Eunuch Hai, and others had been gathered and trained by Wu Wei. This was only a portion of the entire force. They had all seen the Crown Prince before. Sometimes, the Crown Prince would personally set up their training. Everyone in the Blood Shang saw the Crown Prince as their own deity. Shang Wuxin had named the force Blood Shang, and it was now a very formidable force. That was why she allowed a portion of them out to handle the business today. She believed that from here on out, the Blood Shang army would become one of the most respected teams in existence. Let alone everyone else. Even Huanamo Che was shocked at the sudden appearance of the group. He hadn't expected the Crown Prince to have such a powerful force at hand. Moreover, the head was one of the Crown Prince's own personal maidservants. To hand such a heavy responsibility to a woman, such a bold yet confident action made Huanamo Che admire the prince even more. Take in these people, Shang Wuxin instructed. She was lacking in manpower. Finding more people was time-consuming and unreliable. So this time when she took on the task of traveling to the south, she started to have designs on the mountain bandits she would encounter along the way. Mountain bandits were all more or less skilled and could be taught. Furthermore, they were all outlaws who did everything just to stay alive, so they were more ideal. As long as they were given the right kind of training and treatment, Shang Wuxin knew that she would never have to worry about their loyalty. After Wu Wei led the bandits away, Shang Wuxin glanced at the remaining soldiers. Her eyes flashed with a mysterious light. Bai Shaolin was the first to kneel down and call out, "This subject pledges allegiance to Your Highness the Crown Prince." He'd already intended on it anyway, so the scene he'd just witnessed only aided in affirming his decision. "This subordinate pledges allegiance to Your Highness the Crown Prince." The soldiers knelt down one by one. They too had already regarded the Crown Prince as their master. "I will never forsake you." Huanamo Che walked to Shang Wuxin's side. His voice was gentle, but it contained the most powerful determination and resolution. Shang Wuxin nodded in approval and then looked at Wu Wei. "From here to the south, there are many mountains." She handed Wu Wei a sheet of paper. "This prince hopes that you'll be able to sweep all of the mountains marked here under our banner. Wu Ju is on her way here. Hopefully, this prince will you see again when we return to the capital. Yes, this subordinate will not let Your Highness down." Wu Wei vowed. With that, Shang Wuxin mounted her horse and led the soldiers away. The mountains she had marked contained people she found worthy to recruit, and the ones she hadn't marked were the ones she looked down on. She didn't like to waste time on useless things. "Onwards," she commanded lightly. The entourage departed from this mountaintop. Chapter 32 The Sun Sets. In the mountains and forests, there is a small town outside of Fengzhou City, where famines are fought in the south. There is a fleet of thousands of people and a wagon full of grain. Thousands of people were resting there, but the man standing on the heights were not awake at all. He was in a black suit, standing on the top of the mountain in confusion, his eyebrows wrinkled tightly, and his whole body was not warm in the sunset. Lung Yufeng has been waiting here for 2 days, but he has not yet seen the prince and his party. He has never been so anxious in his life. He constantly wonders if the prince is hurt. The more he thought about it, the tighter the wrinkles were. His face looked like a knife was full of worry. On that day, he led the soldiers to leave, but he wanted to stay. But when he really left Prince, he took the soldiers to do what he was supposed to do. Lung Yufeng discovered his own absent-mindedness, his unrelenting worries, his unrelenting regrets, and just a few days, he felt a feeling of sadness that he hadn't felt for 24 years. No matter how much he feels about Prince Edward, he is not a person who disobeyed orders. Lung Yufeng thought for a long time. Finally, he determined to go to find the prince. He wanted to protect the prince, and more importantly, he did not want to leave his side. "Lang Jin!" Lung Yufeng shouted at a distance not far from He Jinjin. Ho Jinjin immediately came to the side of the general. "You will arrange these people and ensure the safety of the food," said Lung Yufeng, and then he was ready to leave and was stopped by the Lang Jin. Lung Yufeng looked at him with some annoyance, but he did hear Lang Jin point to the distance and say, "The prince, they are coming." Inadvertently, the prince came and was in front of Lung Yufeng. Everyone saluted Prince, and he nodded his head so that everyone could do his own thing. Then he looked at the Long Yufeng that had been in a static state since his arrival. "Is there any problem, General?" "Long Yufeng, what's wrong with you?" said Emoche. Long Yufeng suddenly came back. "Prince." Long Yufeng's wheaten skin was a little red, and he immediately lowered his head. However, the prince found it strange. This was the same for Momoche, who was around him. "I don't know what happened to the cold general." The man unwillingly endured a smile and came to the side of Long Yufeng. He asked Long Yufeng if he was sick. "Did he feel uncomfortable? Do we need to find a doctor for you?" "No." Long Yufeng immediately backed away a few steps, then panicked and said, I'm okay. I just smelled the fragrance on Prince Edward's body. Every night when he was called for the protection of the prince, he would smell the prince's fragrance." "Was Prince's body not good?" asked Long Yufeng. But in the moment his flushed cheeks restored the original wheat color. Long Yufeng looked at Prince Edward's pale face and suddenly believed that the prince was sick. There was still some uncomfortable feeling in Momoche's heart and was worried about the prince. Although there was no inquiry, the concern expressed by his eyes was real. "Long Yufeng, bring someone into Fengzhou City now. The court will send you news of food tomorrow and control the security in the city." "Yes." Long Yufeng nodded and went to arrange staffing. Long Yufeng knows that there are too many famines in the city. If there is a sudden appearance of food in Fengzhou City, there will certainly be riots. The people will surely rise up to snatch the food. In the event of giving out food, many deaths will occur. "If you have anything that you want me to do," said Emoche, "then go to the city and bring together some of the doctors and wait for further instructions." Momoche has already guessed what the prince wants to do and nods her head and leaves him. "I have no intention of watching the setting sun. I have been here for a month or two. This is my first step here. In the future, she will continue to move forward. She must, for wealth and status." Chapter 33. The warm sun shines through the gaps of the emerald leaves and is sprinkled in the woods through the morning fog. Tonight, Shang Wuxian didn't care whether she slept in the tallest tree or not. There were a lot of mosquitoes on this night. Even if she wore long-sleeved clothes, it was inevitable that she got bit a few times. Shang Wuxian was not a person who can endure pain, but she is a person who is extremely cruel to herself. But at the same time, she is also a very happy person. If she had the power and strength, she wouldn't treat herself like this. "Prince, do we enter the city now?" Bai Shaolin put on a uniform. Thousands of soldiers were standing there with armor. Even if they were just standing there, they gave a shocking prestige. Shang Wuxian took out a handkerchief and wiped several mosquito bites on the back of her hand. Then, she directly used brute force to smash the white handkerchief into pieces. She leaned against the tree and said with a faint excitement, "Are you ready?" Bai Shaolin did not know why the prince was a little excited. On these days, the prince's mind is very unpredictable. The cold general has already released the news that the prince will enter the city this morning. At this moment, the people are led by the cold general to stand there waiting for the prince. Bai Shaolin reported the news one by one. Mr. Huan has already found the best doctors in the city. He is waiting for the prince's orders. Bai Shaolin was a little excited. He didn't think that not only the generals like the cold general would obey the command of the prince, but even Mr. Huan, who never intervene with court people. Don't ask why Bai Shaolin thinks that the prince will get the throne. The reason is very simple. The rules of the royal family state that if you are part of the royal family and can't get the throne, then you must die. The prince is a strong person, so he will fight for that position. Bai Shaolin used to be like his father. He did not participate in the battle for the throne, but now he wants to stand on the side of the prince. He believes in his own eyes. Prince. Shang Wuxian and thousands of soldiers with food carts have not entered Fengzhou City yet. I only heard the scream of surprise in the city. The scream was filled with desire. The prince is here. We have food. We are saved. I saw those hungry people crying and mourning. The entire Fengzhou City is full of hope and despair. Everyone knelt in front of the prince. The people have been hungry for a long time. Many people have died in the city, and many of them wanted to go out of the city. But the evil-hearted officials were afraid that the situation in the city will let the temple know that every beggar going out of the city did not come back alive. Gradually, the people in the city began to feel despair. The things they could eat were eaten, but that was still not enough. The people who starved to death were still increasing daily. Prince. Standing in front was Lung Yufeng. The prince knew that Lung Yufeng did not have to bow when facing the emperor. In the country, only Lung Yufeng and the Mosh did not have to bow in front of the emperor. I didn't want to let the people get up, but when they nodded, they came out. At this moment, the magical sorrow came over. Prince, the place where the grain is applied is not far from the prefects. The doctors are waiting there. When Shang Wuxian nodded to the people, they all stood up and followed the carriage of food. Lung Yufeng said to the people, "Everyone, go to that building. There is food there. Everyone, get your food." Many people followed the carriage, but no one dared to walk in front of the prince. However, at this time, some people rushed over to the soldiers and went to the carriage of food. One of the people took out a bag and started to stuff the grains of rice into the bag. The soldiers were all capable fighters and could easily defeat these people. But starting a fight will make the situation worse and cause a riot, so they decided to not do anything. Lung Yufeng looked at the people who were faintly rioting, and the people who were already fighting for food and did not know the so-called people. They frowned and prepared to go, but they were stopped by the prince. The prince looked at the people who were fighting for the food. The slender legs were slightly swayed, and the cold air that came out of the body was sharp and squeaky. I was unwilling to pull out the sword of a soldier standing there. I directly picked up the sword and cut the few people who were fighting for the food. The bright red blood dyed the ground, and several dead bodies were in front of the carriage. Someone died. I have no idea who shouted that line. At first, people were looking at the prince like he was the savior. But now, they could only see the handsome young man as death. To the citizens, the prince's actions were cruel. Many of them were scared. But Shang Wuxian didn't feel any remorse. When she came with the food, everyone was grateful, but they were doing irresponsible things. In order to stop these people from stealing the food, she killed them. People are animals who are very forgetful. There are many people who do not see the situation that they are in. Lung Yufeng looked at the citizens. The citizens were slowly approaching the prince. To ensure the prince's safety, Lung Yufeng went to the prince's side. Mosh touched the folding fan at her waist. The fan is not a decoration but a weapon that kills people in a blink of an eye. Bai Shaolin started telling the soldiers to protect the prince and the food. Shang Wuxian's white boots stepped on blood. She stood in front of the citizens. The citizens suddenly quieted down and looked at the teenager. People started to feel guilty for the first time. Shang Wuxian didn't look at their expressions. She started to say, "Thanks to Mr. Huan and Lung Yufeng's help, I was able to convince the king to let me bring food to Fengzhou City. While going through the mountains, there were many thieves and robbers. But I never thought about retreating, and I didn't even think about letting others do this thing kind of job, because I know better than anyone else that there are countless corrupt officials in this world. If I were to let anyone else do this job, even if the food got to Fengzhou, it would not save everyone's lives." Lung Yufeng and Mosh looked at each other, thinking that the teenager who stood in front of them was inspiring. "I have not stopped or given up on helping you. Even these 3,000 soldiers have not given up. When my soldiers and I finally reached this place, we were happy because we were able to bring the food to you and save you." One by one, the citizens started shedding tears. They all squatted down on the ground and looked up at the boy. The people felt embarrassed, and they began blaming themselves for their horrible behavior. When I saw your happy faces, I started to think that everything was worthwhile. But instead of adhering to my instructions and following the rules, you people decided to steal the food that my subordinates and I got for you. You used your hunger as a reason to steal the food, but you never thought about how I felt or how the soldiers felt. Now that the food is here, you guys can do whatever you want." When Shang Wuxian finished talking, the soldiers left the carriage carrying the food and followed the prince. Bai Shaolin looked at the prince with amazement and couldn't help but admire him. He was still worried that the prince would kill someone. The prince's words and phrases not only solved the problem, but also collected the citizens' hearts. Lung Yufeng relaxed his body and admired the prince who stood in front of him. The prince was obviously thin and sturdy. He clearly had lots of things to worry about, but he was smart and tough enough to solve his problems. Only the prince can do all these things. Moshe touched the folding fan at the lower back. The smile on the corner of her mouth became more and more gentle. She always knew that the prince was clever. She has seen his intelligence before. It is inspiring to watch the prince encourage people. Amazing. He really is a fox. Prince. The voices of the people swallowed the city. The voices were full of sorrow and guilt. The people who were kneeling on the ground, pleading for the youngsters in front of them, had tears in their eyes. The citizens were all bullied by the court officials. Over time, they lost confidence in the court and lost their grateful heart. So when the prince appeared in the city with food, they were excited. But they were only excited about living another day. When the prince killed the people who robbed the food, they were afraid because they felt that it was their end. They were afraid of the prince and had an uncontrollable resentment in their hearts. However, when the prince stood there and talked about his situation, he won the hearts of the people. He talked about his hardships along the way. He talked about how he never complained. But what did they do? They only cared about their own food and clothing, but they forgot the original intention of the prince. They competed for food. When they saw how the prince murdered someone, they felt anger. But they forgot how ungrateful they were. The sound of crying did not stop. She walked so decisively. The people who were crying behind them shouted the name of the prince, but saw that the boy did not hesitate. But just as the teenager took thousands of soldiers out of the city gate, a thin child suddenly came out of the crowd. The child was only 7 or 8 years old and fell to the ground with his parents, watching the one who saved them. The big brother was mad at everyone and suddenly broke away from the arms of his parents and ran to the side of his brother. But may he be around the prince? They could not harm the prince with so many soldiers around. Moshe saw child's eyes flash to Bai Shaolin's eyes. Bai Shaolin could not help but smile and nodded quietly. Who are you? Bai Shaolin took out a saber and pointed to the child, who was walking close to the prince. The sword would only pierce the child's thin body. The parents of the child looked at the scene in horror. Even if they wanted to come forward to save their child, they couldn't because they were ordinary people who did not know martial arts. Plus, the soldiers could block them. They could only watch as their child dies under the cold sword. Lung Yufeng looked at Bai Shaolin's movement as Bai Shaolin attacked the child at the last moment when the child was about to die. The figure in white robes came like a gust of wind and picked up the thin child. The child was saved from the sword. The child's parents almost fainted. Seeing the child being rescued, they breathed a sigh of relief. The people there, who saw the prince save the child's life, were relieved. They also marveled at the kindness of the prince and started to respect him. After letting the child down, I lifted my foot and prepared to leave again, but the kid began to hug my calf. "Big brother, don't go," the child said while holding the prince's calf. The pair of clear eyes begged for him to stay. Lung Yufeng looked at the prince who had no expression. "Prince, don't go." The people's cluttered voice shouted over and over again, "Prince, don't go." At this time, the child holding the prince suddenly fainted, and everyone saw that the prince suddenly stopped his own steps and took the stunned child to the door, while Bai Shaolin shouted, "Prince, the doctor you found is just at the gate of the city." The people of the town were even more moved by his actions. They didn't think that the prince would find them a doctor to help them. At this time, they wanted the prince to forgive their ignorance. The parents of the child asked Bai Shaolin, "Is the prince not going anymore?" They saw the prince walking their children to the gate, but the soldiers blocked them. They did not dare to follow. Bai Shaolin squirted a sigh of relief from the nose. The prince loves the people. Seeing the child faint made him sad. He would not leave after a situation like this, Bai Shaolin said. When the people heard Bai Shaolin's words, they couldn't stop their excitement. The prince is not leaving. Great. Imoche looked at the people who lined up to get food and said to Lung Yufeng, "Your martial arts has improved a lot." Maybe others didn't see how the child passed out, but Imoche saw that the child was hit by a small stone by Lung Yufeng in the pressure point. Your own martial arts is just as good, said Lung Yufeng. When the people arrived at Tunmun, they found out that many doctors in Fengzhou City were staying. One of them had already begun to treat the fainted child. The doctor said to the parents of the child was just hungry. He fainted from hunger. The child's parents thanked the prince very much. The prince just nodded unexpressionlessly and began distributing food. Today, even if the people saw the white rice in the big tank, no one was coveted. Everyone stood there, lined up. There was a big pot at the gate. The soldiers wearing armor immediately made a fire and porridge. However, it was an instant thing that smelled of rice porridge. I was able to hear the sound of their bellies. But even if I was hungry again, no one came forward to jump in the team. Bai Shaolin looked at this situation and couldn't help but give a thumbs up to the prince. I didn't want to put the child who hadn't woken up in the hands of their parents, and then said to the crowd, "If anyone is wounded, come here first, and let the doctor see it." Some people came to the doctor. In front of the team, the people were very satisfied with the perfection of the prince, and I also lamented that only the prince would be considerate towards the people. "Prince, the porridge is really good." Bai Shaolin came to the prince, who was standing at the door of the gate. The prince took out a bowl and poured porridge in it. Then he gave it to the child who fainted. Although the porridge is cold, it still tasted good. "Drink it." Moshe and Lung Yufeng looked at the prince. They knew that he was calculating how to use the child to boost his appearance, but now his concern is not mixed with any falsehood. The child squinted and said to the big brother in front of him, "Thank you, big brother." Moshe and Lung Yufeng arranged rooms for the prince and the soldiers in the courtyard. These days, I've been feeling lethargic. I walked into my room. The hot water in the room was ready. I took off my clothes and started to wash my body. It was actually uncomfortable to tie my chest every day, but I was not willing to let my gender be known to the public. Hey, there was a knock on the door outside. I didn't want to get up and put on my clothes. I decided to open the door without tying my hair, but I saw Lung Yufeng and Moshe standing at the door. What? People could still hear the sound of bathing inside the room. Lung Yufeng and Moshe, who were listening, looked up slightly and looked uncomfortable. Lung Yufeng said, "This is a cool oil. It is very useful for mosquito bites. I often use it when I am fighting. At night, it can be used as a mosquito-repellent medicinal oil." I didn't care, but there were some bite marks on my pale back already. It was more conspicuous under the white skin. It was obviously bitten by mosquitoes and accidentally scratched. I didn't think Lung Yufeng would notice this little thing. I didn't take the medicated oil and put it on the table in the room. I was not prepared to let the two enter the room, but now I have another plan. Captivating Crown Prince Chapter 36 The appearance of a white-robed man. The sun was bright. The breeze was warm. Shang Wu Xian walked into Fengzhou City. After a few days of giving porridge and drinks to the people, Fengzhou City had finally settled down. There were no longer any hungry people showing up along the streets, and the civilians had continued their previous business. Shang Wu, she had killed the previous magistrate. Fengzhou City's people can finally go out to make a living. At this time, Lung Yufeng and Huanamo Che were sent by Shang Wu Xian to do other things. It was not that Shang Wu Xian was unwilling to use these two people, but didn't know what medicines had these two people recently taken. They frequently appeared in front of her. Shang Wu Xian was bothered by this. So Shang Wu Xian took on the principle of why not take cheap advantage of these bastards to do some work. So she let the two do their jobs. Because she knew that Fengzhou City's problem cannot be solved just by supplying the grains. Although Shang Wu Xian didn't really care about other people's lives, unless she was in charge of this, then it is necessary to end what one has started. Shang Wu Xian let Huanamo Che went to other cities to collect seeds, and when he returned, she ordered the soldiers to distribute the seeds to each family. It didn't take long for some seeds that can survive to quickly mature and be harvested. It would take at least a few months for the seeds to mature and ready to be harvested, while the food that they brought was only enough for the people to survive for a month. Therefore, Shang Wu Xian let Lung Yufeng take young and strong men from the city to hunt up in the mountains, and for the women in the city to embroider some embroidery products to be sold to other cities. Even though it wasn't much, it was more than enough to last for a few months. After these matters were divided and given to the two people to do, Shangwu Xian was now idle, walking in the city from time to time to hear the respectful greetings from the people. When hearing this, Shangwu Xian felt upset. Her mood to walk around the city disappeared. Using Qinggong, she went to the tall mountain behind Fengzhou City, walked around distractedly. The trees in the mountain were vast. The mottled sun shone through the mountain, where everything was in its purest form, accompanied by pines trees. Shangwu Xian walked slowly and carelessly all the way up to the mountain while she watched nature's scenery along the way. The breath from the chest seemed to be a lot smoother, fresher than before, but when Shangwu Xian was about to reach the top of the mountain, she saw a person squatting in front of her. Shangwu Xian stopped her footsteps. The person squatting in front of her heard the sound of her footsteps but didn't look back, and didn't even make the slightest movement to acknowledge her. Shangwu Xian couldn't see the person's face clearly. She only saw that the white-robed man was bandaging an injured small animal. Shangwu Xian knew that this wounded animal had escaped from another mountain because in these few days, Leng Yufeng took those civilians hunting in another mountain. This little animal was lucky, since it had escaped, and it had met a person to bandage it. Shangwu Xian usually did not pay attention to other people. Although a person who appears at this place is a bit strange, she did not feel any murderous intent from this person. So Shangwu Xian was just a little bit more vigilant when going near the mountaintop. The white robe brushed through the shallow wildflowers. A gust of wind blew. Shangwu Xian's black hair swayed. At this time the squatting man smelled a very light fragrance, which smelled better than any fragrance that he smelled before, even 100 times more than the medicine that he loved. The man picked up the bandaged animal and stood up to look at the boy who was about to walk past him. Long black hair hangs down casually across his thin shoulders and chest, like the ink sprinkled on the Huiyamo mountain water painting. The young man's eyes looked at the surrounding scenery around him. Long eyelashes fluttered slightly. The tip of the eyebrows outlines a touch of evil. She only had a white dress on, but it gives off a magnificent demonic charm. Her white and jade fingers holding a wildflower. The pale pink lips lifted in a smile with a touch of laughter. At that moment, he even thought that he was the wildflower. The man smiled. Yizha looked at the young man with an unknown emotion. He knew that this boy was the prince of Shang country. He just came to collect herbs and happened to be here, and was fortunate to see the young man at the gate of the city a few days ago. At that time, he felt that the prince was very smart and interesting but didn't expect to see the boy again in a few days. When the man started to move and stood up, Shangwu Xian was just a few steps away from him. The man was about 20 years old, with neat eyebrows, eyes that shone like stars, nose high and straight, with dazzling looks, especially the vermilion mole that was just right above his right eye, like a beautiful artwork, giving a strong visual impact. Long ink-like hair that reached down to his waist and spread over the white robes. It swayed gently along the man's movements, giving a silent temptation or elegance to his movements. He was holding a small white snow fox in his arms. The color of the coat was so clean that there was not even a spot or blemish on it. If you didn't look closely, it almost blended into the man's white robe. Even with the man's stunning appearance, Shangwu Xian's footsteps did not stop. It was said many times that the more beautiful the thing, the more poisonous it was. Moreover, just because this man saved a wounded little fox did not mean she thought that he was a good man. When Yizha looked at the young man, he did not know why he was trembling, but when he looked into the young man's eyes, he only saw his own stunning appearance. He did not see any fluctuations in the young man's eyes. Upon seeing that the young man was about to leave, Yizha didn't know why he opened his mouth. Perhaps it was because he finally encountered something that is more interesting than medicine and silver. No, it was a young man. "Young master, please wait," Yizha suddenly shouted out loud. Now that he finally met someone who can finally make him feel differently, how can he let it go? He had a strange feeling in his heart that if he missed this moment, his life would return back to normal. Shangwu Xian stopped her footsteps, not because of other matters just but because of the man's voice. It was a very beautiful voice, clear and pure. Just listening to it seemed to purify the heart and dissipate the haze. "What is it?" Shangwu Xian furrowed her eyebrows slightly and replied with a slightly cold tone. Yizha is stumped for words. He has never been in this sort of situation in the past 20 years of his life. But when he looked at the young man in front of him, his eyes flashed brightly. With an inexplicable voice he asked, "Young master's face looks pale, white lips. It seems that young master has been poisoned." This man, even though is not a doctor but has some medical skills, doesn't know if this young master can let me take a pulse? At first, Yizhe was shocked at the young man's appearance and did not pay much attention. Later, in order to find a reason to talk to him, began to look more carefully to find that the young man's health was not good. In fact, it was extremely bad. If it isn't treated early, it will be detrimental to his life. Shangwu Xian was surprised to hear what the white-robed man had said. She knew her own body well, even knew that this poison is very difficult to cure. Otherwise, it would not take 15 years for her predecessor to find many doctors and medical practitioners, but still not have found a cure. This man should not know she was poisoned with only a single glance when Shangwu Xian is not close with this man. But she could also smell a medicine smell from the man's body like a doctor or a medicine jar. T/N. Sick people who took too many medicines? Looking at the man in front of her, his body was clearly very healthy, so he was either a doctor or a very skilled medical practitioner. What kind of poison is in this young master's body? Shangwu Xian unwillingly asked. No one likes an unknown factor in their own body. She wanted to detoxify the poison very much, but had no way to do it. Yizhe looked at the young man in front of him, who was in some discomfort. He usually didn't like to be in close proximity with people, but he didn't hate to be near this young man. This one requires to take pulse for the young master to know, Yizhe seriously said. Even though he was a godly doctor, he also couldn't randomly be diagnosed someone. He really wanted to know more about this young man. But for this young man's sake, he still needed to take the pulse to give the diagnosis. It used to be him who chose whether to help or ignore other people who beg him to heal them. But why is it very difficult when it was he who wanted to save people now? Shangwu Xian's heart jumped for a moment before her rationality took over. Her body was that of a woman, and the man in front of her was obviously good at medical skills as long as he could take her pulse. He wouldn't know she was a woman. If that time comes, she would have to kill him to shut his mouth. More importantly, the antidote had not been obtained, so she would certainly not do such laborious thing. No need. This young master still matters and will take his leave first. Shangwu Xian nodded and was ready to leave. It seemed that she must found a way to cover up her gender. Otherwise, detoxification would be difficult. Yizhe did not think that this young man would change his face so fast and leave when he said to leave. The young man obviously knew his physical condition but didn't care at all, was not afraid of death or pain. Yi's calm heart suddenly emerged in unknown anger at this capricious young man. "Crown Prince, please stay," Yi suddenly shouted. Shangwu Xian's brows sprung up in hostility. She did not think that this person actually knew that she was a prince. So what were his intentions in getting close to him just now? More importantly, he knew that her body was poisoned. Shangwu Xian hit the man without any warning, not showing a shred of mercy in her strikes. Although Yizhe looked like a fairy, his skill was not bad when Shangwu Xian's attack came. He quickly reacted and dodged while holding the fox in his arms. It looked very simple, but it wasn't easy if his Qinggong did not reach a certain level, as it was simply impossible to escape. But Shangwu Xian did not give up. Her eyes flashed red in excitement. Her right hand clawed near Yizhe's heart. Her force was not light at all. Yizhe saw that the young man definitely wanted his life, even if he was indifferent before in his heart and anger inborn. This was his first good intention to save a person, but not only was this young man not grateful, but he even wanted to kill him. Yizhe held the fox in one hand. The other hand met the boy's palm. Two palms met for a moment, but they were evenly matched. Shangwu Xian took back her hand, mind still thinking of how to kill this man. Not only was his medical skills good, but even his martial arts were also surprisingly good too. If this man tried his best, she was afraid there would not be any good outcome from this. Yizhe looked up at the young man opposite him. His murderous intent had not dissipated at all. He knew that the young man still wanted to kill him. Divine Dr. Yi Wu Wu. The sound came so suddenly that the two tense people were stunned. The little fox who had stayed in the arm of Yi Yizha jumped from his arm and then slowly walked in front of Shang Wu Xian with his injured calf, not showing any fear towards Shang Wu Xian's leaking murderous intent. Once the little fox came to Shang Wu Xian's side, it stretched out its little white paws to reach out at Shang Wu Xian's white clothes. Its spoiled-voiced woo-woo kept on continuously, its eyes showing full intentions of pleasing her. Yi Yizha was surprised at the little fox's action. He was not a good person. His indiscriminate action in rescuing the little fox today was because this little pup was a rare snow fox. It was a rare animal used for detoxification. He had thought that once the little fox injury was healed, he would use its blood for research. But Yi Yizha was now watching the little fox trying to please the young man, displaying a clear, unexpected expression on his face. Yi Yizha then decided not to kill this little fox. Shang Wu Xian kicked the fox away gently with her foot, but the booted fox immediately got up and returned back to Shang Wu Xian's foot. Its round eyes were filled with pleading as if it's been abandoned by its owner, but unfortunately, Shang Wu Xian was not its owner. Yi Yizha looked as the opposite young man's murderous intent has calmed down and quickly said, "Crown Prince, my name is Yi Yizha. I didn't have any ill intention in getting close to Crown Prince's side. I only know Crown Prince's identity because a few days ago I saw Crown Prince's heroic attitude in the city." Yi Yizha, Shang Wu Xian ponderingly asked. Although she arrived at this world not long ago, she had looked upon the world's recent matter, so she knew a bit about this Yi Yizha. Yi Yizha was the world's #1 divine doctor. There were countless people who sought medical advice from him. However, this person's temperament was very unreasonable, willing to save the person no matter whether it's a nobleman or a poor citizen if happy, but unwilling if he was upset. Moreover, it's rumored that this person was a clean freak, and all the diagnosis and treatments of a person were done through a thready pulse, never touching the patient. But what Shang Wu Xian discovered did not stop there, because it was also known through her investigations that many shops in Shang country were owned by this very Yi Yizha. Although it was hidden, there were still traces to follow. Even if Shang Wu Xian didn't know how rich Yi Yizha is, but she definitely knew that he was very wealthy. If this person was an enemy, this subject is here. Yi Yizha sorted out his clothes that had become messy because of fighting. In the past, he was once disgusted with his name, but when he listened to the cute voice of this young man calling his name, Yi Yizha suddenly felt that this was also a good thing. Shang Wu Xian carefully looked at Yi Yizha's eyes. The man standing in front of her could make people feel at peace, in different eyes without any malice, but Shang Wu Xian knew that he was too arrogant. Apologies, this prince has suffered a few assassinations attempts for these past few days, so he had become vigilant. If I have offended Divine Doctor, please forgive me. Shang Wu Xian instantly took back her murderous intent, since she couldn't kill nor offend this man, not to mention with the man's unclear wealth and abundant skills. If she wanted to cure her poison in the future, she would need this man's help. Yi Yizha looked at the young man in front of him, who had immediately taken back his hostility. Upon listening to the assassination attempt on the young man, his heart flashed with a hint of emotion. This young man who was born in the royal lineage had experienced so many things. Yi Yizha did not know why, but he understood where the young man's attitude came from, too. Shang Wu Xian looked at the man's eyes, which revealed pity. If she didn't read it wrong, it was pity. Both of them were adults. What was there to be pitied about? Shang Wu Xian felt that this divine doctor was crazy. No, it's all the men that she had encountered so far who were crazy. It's me who is too abrupt. Yi Yizha apologized. He's not claiming as an indifferent young master or as the divine doctor, but he could see the different Yi Yizha from the young man in front of him. Shang Wu Xian was also not interested in debates between two people. 3. He picked up the little fox at his feet, while ignoring its appearance, and handed it over to the white-robed man in front of him. The divine doctor's pet. This prince will leave first. Since she could not allow the man to take her pulse now, but she definitely didn't want to offend this person. Yi Yizha took the little fox, but the fox in his arms was discontented and tried to jump out of his grasp. Yi Yizha could only helplessly hold the little fox tighter. He didn't want the little fox to die soon. Yi Yizha watched as the young man climbed down the mountain. The thin figure was filled with solitude. Looking at her back, Yi Yizha had a feeling that the young man did not belong to this world. When the young man disappeared from his sight, Ija rubbed his own sour eyes for, I am really crazy. If he's not crazy, then why would he care for the two-faced young man? How could he have so many feelings for the two-faced young man? You little fox. Ija looked at the fox in his hand and remembered the young man. From now on, just follow me. If you ever become his favorite, I will give you something delicious to eat. After saying this, the little fox cried woo-woo as if to agree with him, and together they left the forest. 1. Thread pulse. Using a thread tied to the wrist where the pulse is to measure the person's pulse without touching them. Apparently, this method was used in the imperial harem where the male physicians cannot touch the emperor's females, empress/concubines, and so diagnose them through this method. 2. This sentence is to show Yi's understanding of Shang Wu Xian's attitude towards him as to why she fought with him earlier in the story. 3. I took liberty in translating this to my own understanding. Google Translate translated this as, Shang Wu Xian was not interested in playing Tai Chi for two people, wahaha. 4. Sour eyes. Chinese people uses this sour phrase often in body parts. It usually means that body part is reddening/tired/sore. In this case, it means that the feeling when you want to cry but your tears still haven't come out yet. So your eyes feel sore, tense, and redden a bit? Yeah, that's what it meant here. D. Lung Yufeng not happy note. Please join our Discord to support us or tell us how we can improve. Thank you. Crown Prince, there seems to have been a change in the capital. Wu Ju stood outside the room as she bowed her head. Over the past few days, she had received training from Wu Wei in the capital, who had asked her to go to Fengzhou City to serve the prince. In fact, both of them wanted to serve the prince, but had been rejected. After she heard that she could come and serve the prince, Wu Ju felt very happy for she could now be of use to him, even if it was just as a handmaid. Wu Ju stood there and heard the sound of door opening. She looked up and saw the black imperial robes, of the prince emerge. Wu Ju immediately fell into step by his side. She had just arrived at Fengzhou City last night, and as the crown prince was resting at the time, she dared not bother him. However, as she had not seen him for a few days, she felt that the crown prince's appearance had become more beautiful. Wu Ju thought that in the future when the crown prince was finally crowned as the emperor, she didn't know what kind of lady could be his match. As Wu Ju was lost in thought, she ran into a slightly weakened body in front of her and looked up, stunned. Wu Ju then realized that she had hit the crown prince, who turned around and looked at her indignantly. Crown Prince, Wu Ju kneeled down, but not because she was afraid of the crown prince. These days, both Wu Ju and Wu Wei knew that the crown prince was very tolerant, and as long as you did not make any mistakes, he would often be indulgent. However, not only was she in front of the prince, she even speculated on his future marriage. Wu Ju felt that she had overstepped her boundary. Shang Wu Xian looked at the kneeling Wu Jun. She did not understand. Was she really that scary looking? This girl before her looked like a mouse now, but Shang Wu Xian knew that behind her back, she was cold-blooded and wooden-faced. What are you thinking about that's so important that you couldn't even walk properly? Although it sounded cold, if one listened carefully, they could hear the gentleness in the voice. Wu Ju did not know how to answer. Must she told the crown prince that she had been thinking of who could match his heavenly visage? But Wu Ju could not deceive him, so she bitterly frowned and buried her head. Shang Wu Xian leaned down slightly. The corner of her mouth curved into a sinister smile, and said with a charming voice, "Well, what's Wu Ju thinking about?" From a distance, this appeared to be a scene where the cold and beautiful man seemed to lean down to kiss the shy woman who was kneeling on the ground. The scene was extremely pleasing, but in other people's eyes, this scene was really too annoying. It made them want to kill the woman who was kneeling on the ground. Maybe it was because the crown prince's voice was too charming, but the only Wu Ju could do was distractedly say, "This slave is thinking, crown prince in the future." Wu Ju hadn't even finished talking when a slightly angry voice called out, "Crown prince." Shang Wu Xian was very familiar with this voice, because its owner would come to her place every day before going out to manage a few things. Although not many words were said, it often appeared in her vicinity. Shang Wu Xian straightened up, turned around, and saw Lung Yufeng standing in the entrance to the courtyard. His figure was clothed in a black attire that made him look very handsome and sexy. His sword-like eyebrows were a bit wrinkled. His eyes seemed to be full of anger, and his whole body emitted a thick, bloody smell. T/N. Killing intent? Negative emotions? Aha. It's jealousy T. This was the first time that Shangwu Xian had seen Lung Yufeng's disappointed expression. Upon seeing this kind of Lung Yufeng, Shangwu Xian realized that this man was a general who led the army, not the silly boy who was always shown in front of her. However, Shangwu Xian had to admit that this kind of Lung Yufeng really gave her a strong desire to conquer him. Shangwu Xian nodded at Lung Yufeng and was ready to go to the living room to eat. Unexpectedly, Lung Yufeng, who usually left early, followed behind her. This subject has also not had breakfast yet. Would the crown prince allow this subject to share breakfast with him? Unusually, his voice was unrestrained, and his request was delivered in an overbearing tone of voice. Shangwu Xian said without paying attention. At this time, Lung Yufeng, who was behind Shangwu Xian, looked coldly at Wu Ju. The look in his eyes was like a wolf's, experienced with the horror of tearing people apart, which chilled Wu Ju's whole body. She didn't know when she had offended the general, but she knew that the General Lung seemed to harbor a strong hostility towards her. The two were seated for but a moment before Wu Ju let the servants bring the food to the table. It was no longer like the days past, where no one had waited on Shangwu Xian. T/N. Waited means that no one waits on the side to serve SWX before. The meals on the table were not even half as good as a meal in the Crown Prince's house, as there were currently no good meals to be found in Fengzhou City. Fortunately, Shangwu Xian was able to endure suffering. She was not a demanding person and was able to enjoy the food happily. Perhaps due to the discomfort of Shangwu Xian's body over the past few days, she did not eat much. She tasted a few mouthfuls before putting down her chopsticks. Does the food did not suit your taste? Lung Yufeng, who was still sulking, saw the crown prince put down his chopsticks. He thought that because the crown prince's body was thin, so he could not eat much. Lung Yufeng felt a bit worried, and he ignored his previous negative thoughts to ask. Shangwu Xian took the clear water that Wu Ju handed over and shook her head slightly. This prince is just not hungry. General Long can continue eating. This prince will go first. After she was done speaking, she got up and fearlessly left the living room. As Lung Yufeng looked at the back of the departing crown prince, the delicious meal suddenly became tasteless, and he too put down his chopsticks and left the living room. Shangwu Xian stood atop the watchtower of Fengzhou City and watched as the entire city recovered its former glory. Wu Ju said with some pride, "Prince, you are too great. You don't know, but right now everyone in Fengzhou City, anyone says that the crown prince is like the bodhisattva." Shangwu Xian knew that what Wu Ju said was all true. Recently, when she appeared in Fengzhou City, she encountered so many people who were very grateful to her and wanted to talk to her that she could not appear in front of them at all. Oh, why did this prince not know that this prince is so powerful? Shangwu Xian smiled and teased, but the smile didn't really look like a smile, just a slight pull at the corner of the mouth. Of course, Wu Ju said with some pride. Her usual cold look nowhere to be seen. Crown Prince, you did not know. Nowadays, not only does Fengzhou City know your name, but the whole mainland knows that the Crown Prince loves his people like his children. Although Wu Ju looked very cold and was really a cold person, before the Crown Prince, she was always no different from a little girl. Shangwu Xian knew that Wu Ju had no other intentions in saying that. Since ancient times, people's hearts had always been the most important thing. Although the lower class couldn't help the upper class, it was an important factor. If they wanted to claim the official positions, then they had to follow the public opinion. Where did you learn to be so talkative? Shangwu Xian shook her head and sighed. The longer the little girl stayed by her side, the more cheerful she was. Shangwu Xian didn't know whether it was a good or a bad thing. Wu Ju did not lie. Crown Prince's name is really deserved. A pleasing voice came from the tower's left side. Shangwu Xian did not even have to look back to know Huan Moche had come. Other than him, who else had a voice that was warm as the wind, while the person himself was cool like water? Shangwu Xian looked at the blue-dressed Huanamo Che. His posture was tall and straight, beautiful and extraordinary. His 5 features were profound and clear, with a wing-shaped eyebrow, and peach eyes that were as elegant as an ink painting. Those black pupils felt as if they could suck people in after staring into them for a long time. Huanamo Che had become accustomed towards this silent crown prince. It seemed like the crown prince had no feelings, or even the slightest emotions, for anyone but was a little bit hostile towards him. No matter how he followed the crown prince, he was never paid any attention. For the past few days, the more he involved himself with the crown prince, the more he couldn't extricate himself. He could clearly feel his heart moved towards the crown prince. Whether or not he was ignorant at the beginning, now he knew very well that he liked the crown prince. He did not know how much he liked this crown prince, but he knew that he could not let him go. He had never liked anybody, man or woman. This was the first time he liked a person, but the response was a cold estrangement. Huanamo Che felt that he had a strong mentality. Otherwise, how could he have laughed so easily every time he was ignored by the crown prince, yet still followed him? Regarding Huanamo Che's unpredictable look, Shangwu Xian did not want to know. At the beginning, she thought that this person had self-interest at heart when he approached her. But after these past few days of getting along with him, although she knew that he was not a good person, she understood that he did not have any ill intent towards her, so she just let him be. However, she really did not like this person. Everything he said was a joke, and that pair of peach eyes, 3, were so beautiful that it could make people fall in love with them. Shangwu Xian nodded towards Huanamo Che and led Wu Ju down from the tower, leaving the blue-dressed figure there alone. A cold wind blew, and a figure could be seen standing there in obvious loneliness. XXX, 1. Google searched this words to see how the imperial robes looked like. 2. In this context, Shangwu Xian wondered, how did Wu Ju learn how to be so talkative/poor mouth? But Google translated it to, how do you learn to be poor now? Ha ha ha. 3/peach eyes are said to be very seductive and inviting towards the opposite sex. Google the Chinese words to see how it looks like. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.